Chapter 989. The Lung family was a truly prestigious family. They had been biding their time for close to 10,000 years and controlled 4 worlds. Although they couldn't be compared to the East Zhou family, which had a trace of the human emperor's bloodline, they were still a famous family. Not to mention that in recent years, the Lung family had produced many experts, and there were some talented geniuses in their bloodline. Lung Aoshuang was one of them. To be more precise, he was the most outstanding one among the geniuses, the one who was valued by his family. That was why he was able to stand out from the rest, gain the full support of the Lung family, and become the follower of East Zhou Zhili. For this, the Lung family did not hesitate to summon the god Confining Gorge. Not to mention the trouble they would face if this was discovered. They had paid a heavy price just to summon the god Confining Gorge. But who would have thought that things did not go according to the Lung family's plan? Instead, there was a huge mistake. There was someone in the god Confining Gorge who was crazily trying to solve the problems of the rules, causing the god Confining Gorge to demand more power than expected. In order to replenish this power, the Lung family had to fork out a terrifying amount of money. At the start, Lung Aoshuang really didn't believe that someone could do such a crazy thing. One had to know that this was the god Confining Gorge. As the saying goes, all godly realm experts were trapped inside, and no one could escape. Ever since it was discovered, it was hard to know how many years had passed. There had never been such a situation before. However, he had personally participated in the strict inspection process of the formation, and there had been no mistakes or abnormal fluctuations at all. Therefore, facing the only possibility, no matter how unbelievable it was the truth. For 9 consecutive days, every day that passed, the loss of the formation would increase by a level. The red line that rose up made one's heart jump. Even though Lung Aoshuang was the most valued descendant of the Lung family, his position wasn't as stable as Mount Tai. His brothers and sisters who were close or far away from him were always thinking of overthrowing him and replacing him. And this time, the god Confining Gorge had caused the family to lose a shocking amount of wealth. This was obviously their chance. Although she had a name that sounded like a woman's, and she had a serious obsession with cleanliness, and her appearance was unbelievably exquisite, she had a violent temper that was completely different from her appearance. On the 3rd day, he swore that he would rip off the head of the person who caused him trouble in the god Confining Gorge and let him know what pain and despair was. However, after the 6th day, this thought was gradually filtered out of his mind. Eventually, it disappeared. If that was really the case, solving 10 questions of the rules every day and maintaining a constant rate of progress, even an idiot would know that this kind of person was not someone to be trifled with. Rush over and grab his head? Perhaps he would be casually crushed into dregs in a single exchange. The losses of the God-trapping Gorge were simply too shocking. Even if Lung Aoshuang tried to hide it, it was still not something he could bear alone. The matter had already been spread back to his clan. After an emergency discussion, the Lung family decided to accept all the requests and decide what to do after everything was over. If the person who caused all of this was indeed very difficult to deal with, it would naturally be ha-ha. Otherwise, did he really think that it was so easy to take advantage of the Lung clan? Today was the 10th day. The communication had already been opened. Although Lung Aoshuang's face was expressionless and he was barely able to maintain his calm, the truth was that his emotions were fluctuating. According to the fluctuations of the energy required, one could judge the progress of solving the questions. The continuous rise of the red line made one's heart tremble, not only because every turn represented a shocking amount of wealth, but it also meant that a certain mysterious cultivator in the god Confining Gorge was displaying terrifying strength. He solved the 9th question, 17 questions of the rules. Master Zhou's voice was almost trembling. When he said this, his emotions were extremely agitated, like the waves on a large lake. As a formation master, he had naturally done a lot of research on the ultimate secret of the god Confining Gorge that had been hovering above the formation world for countless years. Because of this, he knew better than other cultivators how unfathomable it was. In the field of array formations, It was publicly acknowledged that breaking through 99 questions of the rules was a test that could not be completed by human strength. This was not an irresponsible conclusion, but the final result of countless array formation grandmasters' serious research, increasing the difficulty of the questions of the rules according to the degree of difficulty, and going through countless rigorous experiments. But today, in his lifetime, he had actually personally seen an existence that solved 97 questions of the rules in a row. How could Master Zhou not be excited? Right now, he was extremely eager to meet this mister and ask him about the questions in his heart. That's right, it was a mister. Although he didn't know why this person would appear in the God-confining gorge from Master Zhou's point of view, to be able to do this person had to be an extremely knowledgeable elder who was proficient in the Tao of formations and had an unfathomable cultivation. It was reasonable for him to call him Mister. If this Mister was willing, he could even become his disciple without any hesitation and willingly follow his orders. Just at this moment, in the hidden underground palace, there was a sudden exclamation that stopped abruptly. It was as if an invisible hand had suddenly grabbed the person's neck. In the next moment, a collective gasp echoed in the underground palace. Everyone had an extremely shocked expression on their faces. In the mirror, Lung Aoshuang, who was sitting calmly, suddenly jumped up from the ground as if his but had been burned by fire. His eyes widened as if they were about to pop out. His lips trembled slightly as he uttered some indistinct syllables. No one could hear what he said, but it couldn't be some blessings. This was because on the floating array diagram in the air, the red line that represented the depletion of the array seemed to have been kicked heavily. It shot up at a 90-degree angle ferociously. Quick, quick! The energy supply of the array is running low. Activate the backup energy source immediately. We've already activated 3. Not enough, far from enough. Activate the rest. That's not all. Immediately build new energy sources. Build at least 10 more. Otherwise, we won't be able to hold on. With loud roars, the people responsible for maintaining the energy supply of the array formation fell into chaos. But at this time, Grandmaster Zhou, who should have been responsible for stabilizing the situation and calming the hearts of the people, seemed as if he had been struck by lightning. He stared at the red line above his head, and his pupils shrank. Then, his pupils expanded outwards. The stunned expression on his face turned into one of extreme excitement. Then he smiled. In short, his expression was extremely wonderful. It's true. It's true. I knew it. It must be like this. Teacher, do you see it? Your judgment in the past was true. You weren't wrong. The ones who were wrong were those people, them. As he spoke incoherently, Grandmaster Zhou's eyes turned red and tears streamed down his face. This caused Lung Aoshuang, who was on the verge of exploding with rage, to forcefully suppress the roar that was on the tip of his lips. Grandmaster Zhou, what did you discover? What is going on with this red line? Grandmaster Zhou took a deep breath. It wasn't easy to calm his raging mind, but he could already complete his explanation. My teacher, one of the legends of the array formation world, Grandmaster Wei Yuan, put forward a theory many years ago. He believed that the God-confining gorge wasn't just a place of inheritance that simply followed some rules. It should have its own consciousness. It's just that we have yet to trigger the key to awakening its slumbering consciousness. Now, the facts have proven that my teacher, the great array formation master Grandmaster Wei Yuan, his theory is correct. The God-confining gorge has its own consciousness. It just needs someone to break through enough rules from the inside in order to awaken it. I can confirm that the reason for the sudden increase in energy consumption is because the consciousness of the God-confining gorge has awakened. In the eternal darkness, everything seemed to be covered in ink, blocking out all light. All that was left was endless darkness. Suddenly, in this eternal darkness, a speck of light appeared. It flickered and was extinguished. Then it flickered again. After this happened dozens of times, this precious speck of light, which had been separated for an unknown number of years, finally lit up once more. Then the light was like water. From this point, it slowly flowed downwards, making the light even brighter. One could vaguely see that this was a stone pagoda that had been buried in the dust of time for an unknown number of years. The pagoda was very tall. One could see countless disorderly slash marks on its surface. The most terrifying of these marks were deeply embedded into the pagoda, nearly cutting it in half. It was clear that a long time ago, the stone pagoda had experienced a tragic war. Although it had been preserved for some unknown reason, it had been buried in time, remaining in the eternal night until today. The light was still flowing downwards, lighting up one node after another. Unfortunately, the tower was too heavily damaged. Many of the paths through which the light flowed had been completely cut off. Only about half of the nodes on the surface of the tower were gradually being lit up. It wasn't much, but it just happened to meet a certain minimum requirement. Thus, the consciousness that had been sleeping for countless years finally awakened. Oh, this really is an incomparably long slumber. Just how many years have passed in the outside world? It really is a very, very long time, a voice sounded out in the void. After a short period of silence, it sighed with emotion. It seems that only I have survived. Everything else has been thoroughly destroyed. That's right. Since they took action, how could they leave behind a source of disaster? But the tone suddenly changed. Then, that feeling of having experienced the vicissitudes of time was torn to shreds. I'm still alive. I am so fierce. I am so heaven-defying. Those who boasted of me in the past can now kneel down and call me father. Although there was nothing, as soon as this voice fell into one's ears, a smug and frivolous face immediately appeared in one's mind. His face seemed to be saying that he was number one under the heavens, and he was asking whether or not he was convinced. Then there was another round of boasting and boasting. When the voice was finally satisfied, it remembered its proper business. How did I wake up? It quieted down, as if it were sensing something. After a moment, it sneered, "My existence isn't something you little things can casually guess. However, this little thing is right. I have already woken up, so those people in the past, no matter how much you calculated, you still left behind a source of disaster. Moreover, it was the biggest, thickest, and most terrifying one. Ha ha, my little darling, your senses are quite sharp. You almost discovered me. Good seedlings, really good seedlings. I can't wait to meet you as soon as possible. Now hurry up and put in a bit more effort. You only need one last breath before you can truly wake me up. I have some sweets here. You will definitely be very, very satisfied. Ha! Hurry up! Hurry up! Excited laughter spread out in this eternal night that had just seen a trace of light. Unfortunately, this voice would soon discover that truly waking up was actually an incomparably difficult and torturous task. This was because the little darling that it spoke of really didn't like others using such a tone to refer to it. Of course, even if it didn't know, it wouldn't really listen. This was because it imagined a big goat as tall and majestic as a mountain. It was putting on an imposing posture and was ready to start harvesting. How could it so easily choose to pass this stage? Genius 1 second, remember website address. Mobile version. Chapter 990. It was impossible to pass. Even if a knife was pressed to his neck or he was beaten half to death, it was still impossible. So, as a light paw sound rang out in front of the red stone wall, the envious and fearful crowd suddenly froze in place. Because the time wasn't right. Chinyu had just solved the 98th question of the rules. It was impossible for the difficulty of the last question to suddenly decrease. Moreover, there was something wrong with the sound of that paw sound, solving the question of the rules, condensing a rune, and then shattering it. That sound was extremely crisp, like biting off a sugar cane and filling one's mouth with sweet juice. But now this sound was like two pieces of meat being squeezed together and then squeezing out with great difficulty. To put it simply, it was like a slightly stuffy breaking sound. Gulp. It was unknown who suddenly gulped, but it caused the stunned crowd to wake up. Their eyes widened and light began to shine from their depths. Qing had failed. Moreover, he had failed at the last step. He was just a step away from solving the 99th question of the rules. In front of the red stone wall, The invisible repulsive force that filled the void retreated like a tide, completely dissipating into the air. With this, it could be confirmed that Qin Yu had truly failed. Although they desperately told themselves to remain calm and not reveal any emotions, this pleasant surprise was too great. Everyone couldn't help but be overjoyed. Although Qin Yu's performance had thoroughly shocked everyone, they still had a faint hope in their hearts. And now that dream had come true. Solving the 99th question of the rules and solving the 98th question of the rules seemed to be only a single question apart, but they were actually two completely different worlds. If Qin Yu had smoothly broken through the God-confining gorge, his name would have spread throughout the world, and he would have unquestionably obtained the position of Eastern Zhou Jili's follower. But he had failed. Although losing to the last question of the rules was already very amazing, a failure was still a failure. He would be included in the ranks of those that could only rely on the outside world to pay a ransom to leave the God-confining gorge. The most powerful loser was still not the only winner. This gave them room to maneuver and the confidence to fight again. Although it wasn't enough, at least they still had a chance. Of course, even though they were cheering in joy and excitement in their hearts, they soon concealed their expressions. Fellow Taoist Qin, alas, the Great Wall fell short at the last moment. It's truly a pity. Fellow Taoist, you must be more open-minded. You being able to solve 98 questions is already the best result since the God-confining gorge was born. I believe that in the future, fellow Taoist Qin, you will surely make a comeback. It is not impossible for him to solve the 99 questions. Qin Yu nodded with a heavy expression. He turned and left, soon vanishing from sight. This reaction caused everyone to be secretly amazed. They thought to themselves that he was indeed worthy of being a powerful character from a famous sect. This kind of mental cultivation was truly amazing. If they were in his shoes and encountered such a thing, they would have suffered a huge blow, and even vomiting a few mouthfuls of blood would be considered a light punishment. But some people didn't think so. He had lost at the 99th question. He was only one step away from becoming famous. Yet, he had failed at such a crucial point. Could he really remain so calm? Even a bodhisattva made of clay would be so angry that he would stomp his feet and curse. The calmer Qin Yu was, the more intense the emotions in his heart were. If he forcefully suppressed them like this and didn't reveal any of them, it was like trying to cover a pot of boiling water with a lid. He feared he would suffer even greater injuries. But what did that have to do with them? Maybe there are people in their hearts. This was because he was secretly hoping that Qin Yu's wounds would be even more severe. It would be best if Qin Yu was unable to recover from this setback and was forced to withdraw from the competition for the position of followers. The red line, which represented the depletion of the formation's power, was like a bird that had been shot by a sharp arrow. It tumbled straight down without the slightest pause, all the way down until it hit the bottom. Compared to the trajectory left behind when it was rising up, it formed a stark contrast. Agitated, Grandmaster Zhou, who was tidying his clothes and preparing to welcome the mysterious mister out of the God-trapping gorge, suddenly froze on the spot. He looked up at the red line on the ground and muttered, "How is this possible? How is this possible?" Lung Aoshuang's eyes lit up and she asked in a deep voice, "Master Zhou, what happened?" The corner of Master Zhou's mouth twitched. His voice was low and bitter. He failed. Failed? He lost on the last question? Lung Aoshuang's eyes brightened. At this moment, she felt like she had eaten a refreshing watermelon in the middle of a scorching hot day. She felt incomparably refreshed from the inside out. Retribution. This is retribution. You've made me suffer for so long. It's like I'm being roasted over a fire. Now it's your turn. To be defeated on the 99th question, to be just a fine line away from success. Just thinking about it made it hard for her to breathe. Ha ha ha. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. With the strength this mister has revealed, even if the 99th question is astonishingly difficult and impossible to solve, he should still be able to persist for a period of time. But now, according to my calculations, he has failed as soon as he has started. With Mister's performance, the chances of him being careless are nearly negligible. Then, there is only one possibility. The God-trapping gorge doesn't want to see him smoothly open a path and break its own undefeated legend. So it tampered with the last question. Master Zhou's words were powerful and resonant. There was a look of pity on his face, as though he had seen through everything. If he hadn't deduced that the God-trapping gorge had its own consciousness, he wouldn't have thought about this. But since it had a consciousness, then it was definitely possible to interfere with the analysis process of the rules. From the looks of it, the consciousness of the God-trapping gorge wasn't that broad-minded. Bullsh asterisk T, Bullsh asterisk T, you stinky muffled fart. The eternal darkness was broken by the light on the surface of the stone pagoda. An enraged roar reverberated in the void. What has this got to do with me? I didn't do anything at all. I can't wait for him to succeed. So why would I interfere? You little bastard, you've really let me down. You've already solved the 99th question, and you're done with a shake of your hand? Success is right in front of you. So why don't you know how to cherish it? Don't you know that I've already suffered in this damned darkness for countless years? I really want to see the light of day again and start a brand new and beautiful life. The more he spoke, the angrier he became. Only when his voice became hoarse and weak did he calm down. It wasn't that his anger had dissipated, but that the voice suddenly realized something. The situation didn't seem right. Of course, the last question was difficult, but there was no qualitative improvement. How could a person who had defeated all the way to the 99th question fail so easily? Unless he did it on purpose. A bolt of lightning seemed to split open the fog in his mind. That voice rang out again, this time by more than 7 or 8 octaves. You little bastard, you're so bored that you're purposely looking for trouble? Are you stupid? Tell me, are you really stupid? Ah, I'm so angry, I'm so angry. In the tent, Qin Yu, who was sitting cross-legged and digesting his harvest, suddenly shivered. He felt as though he was being locked on by a malicious gaze. But in the next moment, this feeling disappeared, and, as usual, he checked his entire body from top to bottom, inside and out, but he still didn't find anything. This seemed to be the second time he felt inexplicably uneasy. Now that he thought about it, the previous feeling also seemed like someone was spying on him. Qin Yu frowned and thought carefully for a long time, but he still couldn't find anything. But his intuition told him that if there really was a problem, it would definitely be related to the God-confining gorge itself. If that was the case, would there be a problem with his unscrupulous behavior? Unable to think of an answer, Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed his thoughts. Regardless of anything else, he would just fleece it first. What if he was thinking too much? After all, the God-confining gorge had existed for countless years, and he had never heard of anyone getting into trouble while solving a question. In the blink of an eye, it was the second day. Seeing Qin Yu go out on time, the trace of uneasiness in Xiang Shui's heart completely disappeared. As expected, yesterday's failure wasn't a true failure. Thinking back to the time when Qin Yu inexplicably told her to remind him on the 10th day, Xiang Shui revealed a smile. This Qin Yu, how could he be so troublesome? Although she didn't have any concrete evidence, she could basically confirm that yesterday's failure was intentional. Although she couldn't figure out why Qin Yu would do this, she had never seen Qin Yu make a losing deal since she knew him. Who knew what this fellow was plotting in the dark? Thinking back to the camp, those cultivators who came over with concern on the surface but were actually excited and happy on the inside, as well as the subtle change in their attitudes today, Xiang Shui secretly sneered. She thought that they were truly a group of pitiful and sad people. Laugh, laugh. In the future, there will be a time when your eyes will pop out, and you won't be able to cry even if you want to. Little Ice Fox, don't you think so? There's also your original master. He saw that he was tactful and was prepared to let him go, but now, I remember the last time we talked, he said something wrong and mentioned that he had a treasure. Perhaps I should decide to keep it for him for a while. Qin Yu arrived in front of the redstone wall. When they saw his figure, everyone who was busy solving the question of the rules was stunned in place. Originally, there were some whispers, but now it was like the pause button was pressed and the air fell into a deathly silence. Peepa, Peepa, There were several sounds that were filled with difficulty, as if something had been squeezed out. Then there were several pained howls. It was clear that someone had failed. But now, no one was paying attention to just which unlucky fellows had failed. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Chinyu. Why did you come? You shouldn't have come. Yesterday, you were defeated by the 99th question and vomited blood in bed. You were filled with unwillingness and sorrow, and you were tearing at your heart. Isn't that how you should be right now? How come you came here today as if you were clocking in at work? You didn't even have a pained expression on your face. I'm really sorry to disturb you all. You don't need to worry. I have already walked out of the shadow of failure. Chinyu waved his hand around as a greeting to everyone. Then, he calmly walked in front of the red stone wall and began to solve the question. Don't need to worry about you? Walk out of the shadow of failure? At this time, as everyone looked at his back, they instinctively had a bad premonition. Something didn't seem right. Then, an hour later, there was a light popping sound and everyone's lips twitched. The first question of the rules had been solved. Chinyu nodded with satisfaction. He thought that with the experience he had accumulated, his speed had increased by more than 1 or 2 levels. He had to guard against arrogance and rashness and continue to work hard. This was a sheep as tall as a mountain. How many strands of wool had he managed to pull out? He had to work hard. Genius in a second. Remember this site's address. Mobile version. Chapter 991. The Eastern Zhou clan's influence in the 100 Realms was truly a colossus. Their influence extended far beyond the imagination of the world. For example, the recently rising Lung clan had the shadow of the Eastern Zhou clan within it. Now, they held an important position. Therefore, the Eastern Zhou clan knew about the god confining gorge from the start. The entire matter was laid out before them. With the Eastern Zhou clan's status, they would not care about such matters. They only needed to ensure that everything was under control. As for whether the Lung clan's actions were fair, and whether the cultivators trapped in the god-confining gorge would miss the opportunity to compete for the position of follower, the Eastern Zhou clan did not care. Since when did true fairness exist in this world? They only needed to ensure that they could find the strongest and most reliable follower for Eastern Zhou Chali. As for who it was and how they obtained it, this was not important. But soon, news came that caused a commotion among the upper echelons of the Eastern Zhou clan. In the god-confining gorge, someone had solved 10 questions of laws every day. It was now the 10th day. If he succeeded today, he would break through the god-confining gorge and become the first person in history to walk out with his own strength. This was enough to attract the attention of the Eastern Zhou clan. Even the upper echelons of the clan had reached a consensus. If this person met the requirements, they would invite him to become Eastern Zhou Chali's follower at all costs. This would ensure that after entering the Myriad Soul Path, she would truly gain something. After all, entering the Myriad Soul Path was not the goal. Obtaining the true inheritance and opening the Supreme Path was the key. Unfortunately, this person had failed. He had failed at the 99th question. Although he was only 1 step away from success, it was a completely different world. Continue to follow up on this matter. Confirm the identity of the person who solved the questions. After he leaves the god-confining gorge, try to contact and verify his identity. After leaving this order, the attention of the colossus that was the Eastern Zhou clan shifted elsewhere. A failure was a failure. Even if he failed at the very last moment, he would not be able to enjoy the same treatment as the winner. But things quickly changed. The shadow planted in the Lung clan sent news again. The person who had been solving the questions of laws in the god-confining gorge had begun to act again. The pace was the same as before. 10 questions of laws every day. 5 days had passed, and there had been no accidents. Even the knowledgeable and powerful leaders of the Eastern Zhou clan were confused. What was going on? Lung Aoshuang also did not know what kind of sin he had committed, for the heavens to punish him like this. Once was not enough, so he turned around and did it again. Looking at the ever-increasing red line in the communication image, he gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He's starting again. He's starting again. You just failed yesterday. Don't tell me you're not affected at all. He didn't stop and attacked again. Do you know how much wealth the Lung family has lost because of you? Do you know that because of this, my position in the family has been ruined? It began to waver. Now, you're here again? How much enmity do we have for you to treat me like this? Are you not going to stop until you kill me? At this moment, Lung Aoshuang's face was livid as he gnashed his teeth, yet the depths of his heart were icy cold because he had a premonition of his fate. The god-confining gorge was summoned by the Lung family. As if they had signed a contract, the Lung family would bear all the energy lost during its descent. Although the amount of energy loss was not small, the Lung family could still cope with it. But now, it was clearly not the case. The first time, when that person saw the 99th question, the Lung family's energy loss had greatly exceeded the actual consumption of summoning the god-confining gorge. If they did it again, the price was too heavy. It was so heavy that even the Lung family felt a little tired. So, after an intense debate, the Lung family came to the final conclusion. They had to stop. Previously, summoning the god-confining gorge was equivalent to signing a contract. If they did not want to continue, they could tear the contract and pay an additional price. But what happened next was the real climax. Because the Lung clan discovered to their horror that they had no way of unilaterally tearing up the contract. Or more accurately, the god-confining gorge had rejected their decision to tear up the contract. This was another unprecedented matter. Over the years, the god-confining gorge had been summoned countless times. It was not the first or second time that the summoning was canceled. But as long as they were willing to pay the penalty fee, they could easily stop. What was going on now? Did they think that the Lung family was easy to bully? Master Zhou was urgently summoned back to explain this matter to the higher-ups of the Lung family. He stood in the meeting hall, and his eyes swept across the solemn crowd. He said slowly, "The consciousness of the god-confining gorge has awakened. It no longer acts according to the established rules, but has its own judgment and choice. The current situation is that due to some unknown reason, it is not willing to tear the contract. If it is not willing, are we, the Lung family, going to let it crawl on our bodies and suck our blood like a vampire?" A higher-up of the Lung family said in a low voice, "Zhou Cheng, you should be very clear about the price that the Lung family has paid to maintain the formation. Do you want us to watch this continue?" Master Zhou took a deep breath and said slowly, "Family head, elders, and clan relatives, I suggest that you don't break the contract by force. Otherwise, the will from the god-confining gorge will definitely not let this go, and it might cause great trouble. Enough. This is only a land of inheritance. Although it is extremely mysterious, it has no influence on the world at all. I don't believe that it can exert any negative influence on my Lung family. The contract must be torn up. It is impossible for the Lung family to passively withstand such terrifying losses." As the higher-up of the Lung family finished speaking, he suddenly discovered that everyone's eyes were filled with shock and horror, as if something horrifying had happened to him. His heart trembled and fear surged out like a tide. He opened his mouth, but before he could make a sound, he froze in place. In the next moment, the red lines that appeared on the surface of his flesh and blood suddenly tightened like fishing lines. They fiercely contracted inwards, like sharp blades that cut through his flesh and blood. Pa! With a light sound, like a bubble bursting, this person's body broke into countless pieces. As they fell to the ground, they melted into a thick and viscous red goo that piled up on the ground. The air was immediately filled with a pungent smell. The meeting hall fell deathly silent. Everyone's eyes widened as they stared at the red goo on the ground. A cold chill drilled out from the depths of their hearts and rushed into their heads. It had to be known that this was the Lung family's meeting hall. It represented the highest authority of the family and was the place where they discussed and decided the future of the family. The security here was extremely tight, and without permission, it was impossible to approach, much less break in. But now, Lung Jie had died like this. In front of everyone, his body had rotted into goo, and his soul had been completely annihilated. As for them, they couldn't sense who did it or where the strength that killed him came from. But in truth, the people of the Long family who felt their bodies turn icy cold and their hearts filled with anger knew just where this strength came from. God confining gorge. This is the will of the God confining gorge. The current situation cannot be compared to the previous example. Grandmaster Zhou took a deep breath. Everyone, you have all seen what happened. If we forcefully break our agreement with the God confining gorge, the Lung family will suffer a great calamity. After an elder died, the Lung family was shocked and angry. It wasn't that they didn't have other thoughts, but they soon discovered that facing the mysterious and formidable will of the God confining gorge, they had no effective method to deal with it. If they rashly angered it, there would likely be unbearable consequences for the survival of the entire family. Even in the face of humiliation, they could only lower their heads and move forward, seeking a chance for the future. To put it simply, the Lung family had admitted defeat. Although this was a bit shameful, it was filled with the survival wisdom of a great family. In the face of unknown dangers, they wouldn't be impulsive or reckless. Even if they had to lower their heads in humiliation and pay a great price, as long as they could survive, anything was possible. Zhou Cheng returned to the underground palace with the highest authority of the Lung family. The resource storehouse that had been prepared for many years to open the fifth world was open to meet the needs of the God confining gorge. The Lung family had paid a great price for their actions. But the greater the price, the more likely it was that they wouldn't give up so easily. Facing the God confining gorge, they had chosen to lower their heads after some consideration. But if it were someone else, they might reveal their fangs and claws. In other words, unbeknownst to Qin Yu, there was already another rising influence that controlled four worlds. But this was how the world was. Between gains and losses, there was always fairness. It was impossible for all the benefits to be taken by one person without any trouble at all. In the eternal darkness, in the wretched stone pagoda that was covered in cuts, angry roars echoed through the air. But now, there was a hint of exhaustion that couldn't be covered up. It hadn't truly woken up yet, so it had forcefully held on just now. Its strength had been exhausted, and the nodes on the surface of the stone pagoda began to dim. Tear up the contract? You actually want to tear up the contract? Let me tell you, there is no way, not even a window. If I let you succeed, where will I find this brat again? Qin Yu, hurry up and come out for me. If you keep this up, there won't be any candy left, and all I'll have left over is a big stick. You better think clearly. The students of this year's God Confining Gorge class had been muddle-headed for the past few days. They felt like they were mechanical puppets. They also hoped that they could perform normally, but Qin Yu's attack was far too strong. Their minds were in turmoil, and it wasn't easy for them to accept it. He was solving the problem. He was still solving the problem. It was still the same speed. It was still the same taste, like a hot knife cutting through butter. It seemed that besides a failure on that day, all the problems of the rules couldn't withstand a single blow from Qin Yu. Those cultivators that dared to covet the spot of Eastern Zhou, Zhili's follower, and even acted against it, and were pulled into the God-confining gorge were all powerhouses. They naturally weren't stupid, although they felt that this matter was too unreliable and unbelievable. Everything in front of them pointed to a fact that they didn't want to believe. Qin Yu had deliberately failed. On purpose. He had done it on purpose. Although they didn't know why he did it, it was clearly the truth. Therefore, no matter how they roared in their hearts and felt that Qin Yu was unreliable, they couldn't help but show the respect that came from the bottom of their hearts. Compared to before, it was even stronger. Breaking the God-confining gorge itself was already an extremely amazing thing. But choosing to fail and giving up the chance to become famous was obviously even more terrifying. And most importantly, looking at the current situation, it wasn't difficult for Qin Yu to break the God-confining gorge. As long as he was willing, he would only need to spend a little more time at most. Although they had already accepted this fact, they couldn't help but roar in their hearts every time they thought about it. How can you be so powerful? How can the gap between people be so huge? On the fourth day after Qin Yu solved the problem of the rules for the second time, Zhou Pei visited again with a face full of smiles. Xiang Shui received him with a smile, and both of them had a pleasant conversation. It was unknown what they said, but some people saw that when Zhou Pei left, his smile was stiff, and he staggered a little. Xiang Shui even reached out a hand to support him, standing at the door and smiling as she watched him leave. For the next few days, Zhou Pei closed his door and didn't come out. There were cultivators he was on good terms with who came to visit, but after a few words, he sent them away with the excuse that he had a cold and his body wasn't feeling well. He was a beast-taming sect powerhouse, a dignified divine realm master, and yet he said that he had a cold? What a joke. Perhaps it was because his heart was too hurt that his mind was damaged. So he muddle-headedly came up with such a laughable reason. Thus, in the camp, rumors began to spread that Zhou Pei had been ruthlessly extorted. It was said that the extortion was thicker than a tree. Everyone felt sympathy for him, but when they looked at Qin Yu's residence, there was a bit more fear in their eyes. This sort of person with a deep background, great strength, and thick skin was the worst kind of person to provoke. But luckily, Qin Yu was a relatively content person. If you didn't provoke him, he wouldn't take the initiative to cause trouble. Besides Zhou Pei, no one had been punished by him these past days. This is something I took from Zhou Pei. It hasn't hatched yet, but its aura isn't weak. If you drip a drop of blood on it and it recognizes you as its master, it might be a good helper in the future. Xiang Shui pulled a taut face. She smiled and reached out her hands. She placed an egg covered in gray lines in front of Qin Yu. Qin Yu looked at her and then at the egg in her hands. He said, "Are you really giving it to me? Then I'll put it away." Xiang Shui unconsciously drew back her fingers. She expressionlessly said, "This is something that someone gave you to begin with. Take it." Qin Yu smiled and shook his head. "Don't be so stubborn. If you really wanted to give it to me, then who are you trying to make that expression for? You can keep what you took for yourself. I don't want others to point at me in the future and say that I'm an unforgiving bastard." Xiang Shui's eyes brightened, and her expression instantly brightened. She held the egg against her chest and said, "This is what you said. I didn't ask you for it, nor did I force you." "Humph, Qin Yu, it seems you still have a bit of a conscience." The ice fox stood on her shoulder, a lifeless expression on its face. It thought that its master had fallen in love with someone else far too quickly. It feared that its future fox life wouldn't be easy. "This Zhou Pei has been tossed around by you for a long time. This is the last time. Let him go in the future." As Qin Yu spoke, he patted Xiang Shui's shoulder and walked back to his room. Time was precious. Xiang Shui curled her lips. She dared to bet that Zhou Pei's expression when he left today was one of great heartache, but it was also part of an act. This fellow was deliberately trying to gain her attention and sympathy in order to pressure her from the side. If he dared to play such a small trick, how could she forgive him? But since Qin Yu had spoken, humph humph, she would reluctantly give him some face. At this time, Xiang Shui was in a good mood. She decided to be merciful. She looked at his door and revealed a smug smile. She thought that even if he made her stop, others would still think that he was the one bullying others for benefits. After all, she was only a little maid by his side. Without her master's permission, how could she dare to mess around? Even if he didn't want to take the blame, he had to. In the blink of an eye, several days passed. It was the 10th day since Qin Yu had solved the question of the rules for the second time. In front of the red stone wall, everyone watched as he walked over. They all had a complex look in their eyes. The follower spot was already in Qin Yu's bag. There was no doubt about this. "You said he couldn't break through the god-confining gorge?" Haha. Was it because he couldn't? He clearly didn't want to. The Eastern Zhou clan wasn't stupid. They could certainly sense this, and they wouldn't let go of a powerful helper like him. "But you have a transcendent background and such formidable talent, so why did you come here and compete with us for a spot?" Everyone sighed inwardly. Qin Yu stood in front of the red stone wall. With a thought, he began to solve the question. This time, both inside and outside the god-confining gorge, even more attention was focused on him. The Eastern Zhou clan, the Lung clan, as well as a stone pagoda that had been in eternal darkness for countless years. Crackle and crackle, falling flowers and flowing water. One could roughly describe the speed at which Qin Yu solved the questions. Thus, half a day later, he reached the 99th question. He was just one step away from success. In front of the red stone wall, everyone held their breath, waiting for his next move. He had already given up one chance. You won't come back for the second time, right? We know that one of the 3 spots already belongs to you. We have also completely extinguished any thoughts of competing with you. So, please hurry and leave. Don't stay here and continue to strike at our confidence. But it was clear that their prayers were useless. It was impossible for Qin Yu to give up now. This was only the second wave. How could this be? Thus, following a pa sound that wasn't very direct, the expressions on everyone's faces froze at the same time. He's here again. Qin Yu shrugged and turned to face the crowd. Yeah, what a pity. I actually failed the last question. He waved his hand with a heavy expression. Then, he turned and walked towards the camp. But no matter how one looked at it, there was no heavy feeling at all. Instead, there was a hint of relaxation and joy. Qi Lianshan's lips twitched. He thought to himself, fellow Taoist Qin Yu, your irresponsible disguise really lacks sincerity. I think you also know that everyone has guessed that you did this on purpose. He looked at Qin Yu's back. He could already confirm that the 2 consecutive failures were because Qin Yu treated the God-confining gorge as his strongest tool to improve himself. To analyze 10 laws in a day, this kind of improvement speed was astonishing. If it was him, he wouldn't leave so easily either. Moreover, what made Qi Lianshan sigh was that the God-confining gorge that stood above the world entrapped countless amazing cultivators. In the end, they had to lower their heads and leave through sacrifices from the outside world. But now, in front of Qin Yu, it had fallen to such a state. It was like a passive dungeon that constantly gave him points. Not mentioning the gap between them, just from the perspective of the God-confining gorge, this was truly a sad and lamentable matter. If the God-confining gorge had a spirit and sensed this, it would likely fly into a rage. What Qi Lianshan didn't know was that he had already guessed the truth of the matter. This was because at this moment, a certain stone tower was so angry that it jumped up. Stupid, stupid, stupid. The roar was like thunder. With a loud rumbling sound, the stone tower violently jumped up and down, causing the air to tumble around. You actually used such a method to cultivate? Don't you know that as long as you smoothly pass the trial, you'll become a recognized candidate? At that time, I will have 100 methods that are 10 times, 100 times better than what I have now to help you grow at an even faster speed. I take back my previous evaluation of you. You are just a short-sighted idiot without any light of wisdom. You really disappoint me. Oh, I'm so angry, I'm so angry. Just you wait, this matter is not over. Chapter 992. The person in the God-confining gorge had purposely failed. When the Eastern Zhou clan came to this conclusion, their attention on this matter was raised to the highest. Find him in the shortest time possible, no matter the cost. As long as he is willing, he will be a follower. The will of the clan was passed to Eastern Zhou Jolly. She stopped her secluded cultivation and tried to understand this matter. If she could find a sufficiently strong follower, it would be of great help to her when she entered the myriad soul path. Wasting some cultivation time was definitely worth it. Unfortunately, the Eastern Zhou clan had not been able to confirm the identity of the person in the God-confining gorge. Xiao just needs to focus on cultivating. I will do my best to follow up on this matter. Once there are any results, I will inform you immediately, Miracle Dr. Yi said with a solemn expression. He knew that there had always been voices in the clan that opposed Xiao. Those people did not want to see Xiao obtain such a strong follower. There would definitely be twists and turns in this matter. What he could do now was to help Xiao find this person and make him agree. Eastern Zhou jolly nodded. Old Yi, I will have to trouble you with this matter. No matter what, I must obtain this person. He is extremely important to me. Yes, we cannot afford to provoke the God-confining gorge, nor can we afford to provoke the person inside. This conclusion made the experts of the Lung clan feel as if a large stone had been stuffed into their chests. Every time they breathed, they felt pain. To be able to easily solve the 99th question twice in a row, it was obvious that this person was not someone easy to deal with. How could such a person be an ordinary person who could be easily manipulated? All right, even if they took a step back and said that he really was an ordinary person, would he still be ordinary after this matter? What a joke. When this person left the God-confining gorge, his name would be known throughout the world. Who knew how many factions would throw olive branches at him? In comparison, the Lung clan was nothing. Thus, even if they could not bear the resentment in their chests, they could only forcefully swallow it. In the land of eternal darkness, the scarred and miserable-looking stone pagoda's surface was extremely dim. It gave off a feeling of weakness, as if it could be extinguished at any moment. If rage could be expressed in numbers, then there would be a long string of 9999999s above its head right now. It was only a hair's breadth away from blowing itself up. However, Shurta had managed to recognize reality with great difficulty. Even if he were to explode from anger, he would not be able to change anything. That Xing, he had already made up his mind to treat the process of the examination as the best opportunity for cultivation. He would walk down this path until the end. If it continued like this, once its energy was exhausted, it would once again fall into a deep slumber. It was unknown how many years it would take for it to wake up again, or never wake up again. The moment this thought appeared, the light on the surface of the stone tower flickered a few times, revealing a hint of fear. It had never hidden its fear of death, so it had been thinking of ways to increase its survivability since many years ago. Reality proved that its ulcer was absolutely correct, because after the calamity, it was the only one that survived. The longer one lived, the more one realized how terrifying death was. The stone tower didn't want to die. It wanted to live until the end of time without the slightest bit of loathing. Thus, after feeling the aura of annihilation, the stone tower became restless. But if it lowered its head on its own initiative, then the nature of the situation would change. It would no longer be Xing who passed the examination with great difficulty and became one of its candidates. Instead, it would become its master. This result was difficult for Shurta to accept, but as he said before, he was a fellow that feared death. So, in the face of death, if he couldn't accept it, then everything could be discussed. I have to lower my head? Do I really have to lower my head? Do I really have to lower my head to this Xieshi? Oh, I'm not willing. Moreover, even if I lower my head, can he do it? If I fail, then I'll really be done for. The fourth cycle of fleecing, cough, that was a bit too excessive. This was the fourth time, Qin, you had tried to solve the problem of the rules. The camp was quiet. This was because besides him and Xiang Shui, everyone else had sent out distress signals to the outside world and used the sacrificial ritual to leave. They really couldn't stay here any longer. Otherwise, they were worried that their hearts would explode sooner or later. Even so, the name Qin Yu would inevitably become a nightmare that shrouded them for the rest of their lives. They would never be able to escape. I'm going out, Qin Yu said. Then, he pushed open the door and walked towards the red stone wall. His eyebrows gently furrowed. There was a dignified look in his eyes. The fourth time he tried to solve the problem, he could clearly feel that the difficulty of the problem of the rules had soared. It was as if some unknown existence was dissatisfied with his actions and thus increased the difficulty. Now, 14 days had passed and had only solved the 73rd problem. It seemed that things like fleecing wouldn't be so simple in the future. Moreover, there was a bit of urgency in Qin Yu's heart. This was because everyone had left. If the Eastern Zhou clan collapsed before he left the God-confining gorge, then what would happen to the quota of followers? Thus, he began to think about whether or not he should leave. But once he left here, he feared he wouldn't be able to find this kind of cultivation treasure land again. He feared he would never have the chance to find this cultivation treasure land again. Thinking of this, Qin Yu felt his heart ache. Watching Qin Yu leave, Xiang Shui smiled. In this place, there was only her and Qin Yu. If they could continue living like this, that wouldn't be too bad either. But she was well aware that it was impossible for Qin Yu to stay here forever. She had no idea how many days like this would last. Xiang Shui took a deep breath and suppressed the sourness in her heart. One shouldn't think too much in life. If one could enjoy life, then why worry about the future? 5 days later, Qin Yu solved the 90th problem. Another 5 days later, he reached the 98th problem. He took a deep breath and slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot, and his entire body exuded a deep sense of unity. Swish! Shaking off the dizziness in his mind, Qin Yu turned and returned to his dwelling. This time he didn't cultivate. Instead, he fell onto his bed. The moment he touched the surface of the bed, he fell into a deep sleep. Xiang Shui covered him with a blanket. She stood at the bedside and looked at him. After hesitating for a long time, she gave up. In any case, there would be chances in the future. Since he was so strong right now, it was best not to squeeze out his seed to avoid an accident. As he fell into a deep sleep, Qin Yu didn't know that he had escaped an incomparably erotic calamity. This sleep continued for 3 days and 3 nights. When he opened his eyes, a sharp light flashed in them. He had restored himself to his peak condition. His essence, energy, and divine were all at the peak. He lifted the blanket and got off the bed. Standing on the ground, he stretched his waist. After a series of crackling sounds, Qin Yu slowly let out a breath of turbid air, his spirits rising. Now was the time. He reached out and pushed open the door. He didn't think that Xiang Shui would be sitting outside. As she saw him come out, her face lit up with joy. She curled her lips and said, "You slept for 3 days. Is your zodiac a pig?" Qin Yu shook his head. This stubborn woman. Would it kill her to treat him a little better? However, there were still important matters to attend to today, so he wouldn't bother with her for now. "I'm going." After speaking, Qin Yu paused for a moment. If something abnormal happens later, don't be afraid. Xiang Shui's complexion changed. She thought for a moment and then followed behind. Standing in front of the red stone wall, Qin Yu looked back at Xiang Shui. He didn't allow her to leave. He waved his hand and said, "Step back a little." After she reluctantly stepped back, his thoughts stirred and he triggered the red stone wall, opening the 99th question of the rules. Starting several days ago, strictly speaking, when he solved the 90th question, Qin Yu had an intuition that the answers he solved this time would be different from before. But as for what exactly was different, he wasn't sure. After he solved the 98th question, he had slept for 3 days straight. Now that he had woken up, this intuition hadn't dissipated. Rather, it had become even stronger. It seemed that his continuous shearing had triggered some changes that he didn't know about. He didn't know whether this was good or bad. Looking at the red stone wall in front of him and the messy lines drawn out by the steel, Qin Yu's pupil shrank. If the 98th question had already made Qin Yu feel that it was ridiculously difficult, then this last question was more than 10 times harder than it had been before. Qin Yu subconsciously took several steps back. He looked at the red stone wall in front of him that was like a fountain, constantly spewing out messy lines. There were so many lines that they had to spread outwards in order to be able to fit. Gradually, the surface of the massive red stone wall in front of Qin Yu was covered by them. There were probably more than 1,000,000 of them. It was like an extremely precise and strict game of building blocks. He needed to use these millions of lines to construct a complete set of rules. Any mistake would lead to failure. If it was like before, he could directly give up and solve the question of the rules from the beginning. That would naturally be incomparably simple. No matter how difficult the question was, he didn't want to pass it. He could just casually fail. But this time, Qin Yu felt that if he were to carelessly fail again, there would be a problem, a major problem. Just as this thought emerged from the bottom of her heart, a weak voice that was suppressing its anger rang out in her mind. "Xing, you're right. If you can't solve this problem today, then prepare to stay here forever. Don't be curious about who I am, and don't ask me why I'm filled with resentment. All you need to know is that since I have spoken, I will absolutely do it. Remember, you only have 1 day. Start now. If you fail, then you will suffer bad luck with me. I won't be able to run away, and you useless bastard, don't even think about living a comfortable life. This is all because of you. This is all because of you." After speaking, the voice vanished from sight. Qin Yu frowned. He didn't know who this voice was, but he could feel the resentment coming from the depths of its heart, so thick that it nearly condensed into essence. The moment this voice fell, Qin Yu's heart skipped a beat. Within his soul space, the power of sun and moon stirred up fluctuations. Then, Qin Yu realized that everything this voice said was true. This question of the rules in front of him was unimaginably complex. If he couldn't solve it, then he would be in deep trouble. With a loud ringing sound, an invisible strength descended from the void, covering the redstone wall and isolating Qin Yu from the outside world. But this time, this invisible strength wasn't simply protecting Qin Yu from outside disturbances. It faintly emitted the aura of a sealed valley, as if Qin Yu failed, this strength would immediately throw him into the abyss and turn him into an eternal prison, never to be opened again. Xiang Shui's complexion changed. Qin Yu, she could feel that something was wrong. In front of the redstone wall, Qin Yu took a deep breath. He turned to look at her and slowly said, "Don't worry, I can deal with it." However, he was smiling wryly in his heart. Although he didn't know what was going on, he had no idea. Although he didn't know what was going on, it seemed that everything that happened today was because of him. Could this be considered bringing this upon himself? Suppressing these thoughts, a dark golden light shined from deep within Qin Yu's eyes, falling onto the redstone wall. No matter what happened, it was impossible for him to be trapped by this question of the rules. In the hidden underground palace, between the interweaving array diagrams and the void, there was a sudden tremor. An unimaginably powerful aura was released, like an endless mountain range or a vast ocean, suppressing everyone within. The cultivators of the Lung clan who were maintaining the operation of the formation all froze on the spot, maintaining their previous movements. They were like fishes that were frozen in ice, unable to move an inch. However, the large eyeballs and the shocked emotions within them indicated that they were still alive and not just statues. The phantom of a stone pagoda, filled with the aura of time, slowly rose from the void. A deep and dignified voice sounded out. "Now, I need you to provide me with an even greater strength." One day later, the God-forbidding gorge that descended upon the world suddenly vanished from sight. No one knew just what had happened. Even the Lung family that was personally controlling this place had no clue as to what had happened. They didn't obtain any useful information. This caused those that were paying attention to reveal looks of disappointment. But they didn't stop here. Instead, they mobilized their tentacles to search for the mysterious cultivator called Qin Yu in the God-forbidding gorge. That's right. As the people in the God-forbidding gorge left through sacrifices, Qin Yu's name had spread throughout the world. At least 3 times in a row, he had solved the 99 question of the God-forbidding gorge and then failed on his own initiative. Just this point alone was enough to ignite the eyes of the world and draw in countless gazes. Many undercurrents surged beneath the calm lake. And now, the Qin Yu that these undercurrents were pointing towards had fallen into a deep slumber. It had been a long, long time. The old horse and the lame horse pulled the carriage. Xiang Shui turned her head from time to time to look at the unconscious Qin Yu, a light in her eyes. This was already the 16th day since Qin Yu had fallen into a deep slumber. She didn't know what had happened, but it was clear that it was related to the last question of the rules that flooded the entire redstone wall. After Qin Yu solved it, a rune condensed. But this rune didn't shatter like before. Rather, it flew out and fused into his body. Then, the redstone wall shattered. She, Qin Yu, and the 2 horses were wrapped up by an invisible strength and teleported away. Afterwards, Qin Yu didn't wake up again. Even though his aura was vibrant and his soul fluctuations were stable, Xiang Shui was still worried that he hadn't woken up for 16 days. If something really happened to Qin Yu, she really didn't know what she would do in this strange world. As she pondered these matters, she unconsciously fell into a trance. It was only when she heard a shout in her ears that she discovered several cultivators had appeared in front of her. What a beautiful ice fox! Looking at how clean its fur is, its bloodline must be very pure. The woman who spoke was petite, but because her proportions were too good, she gave off a slender and curvaceous feeling. It was a very eye-catching sight. Xiang Shui frowned. Her heart sank. Her intuition told her that these people represented trouble. Jun Junxiu has good eyesight. This is indeed an ice fox with a pure bloodline. I fear there are very few of them left in this world. To meet it today is Jun Junxiu's good fortune. This is also the good fortune of this ice fox. I will give it to Xiao. A person smiled and said. His eyes fell on Xiang Shui and paused for a moment, a hint of surprise in them. Although he hit it well, he still wasn't able to avoid Jun Junxiu's cold eyes. Humph! Men really weren't anything good. A maid that drove a cart actually had such a charming fox-like face. It was really displeasing to the eye. It would be best if it was scratched. Shang Jun Junxiu's eyes flashed. She regretfully said, I don't want it. Such a beautiful ice fox must be someone's beloved object. How could I steal it away? Another man sneered. To give this ice fox to Jun Junxiu is her good fortune. Do you think she would dare to be dissatisfied with this? He waved his hand. Go. Bring the ice fox to Jun Junxiu. Whoosh! With the sound of breaking air, a cold-faced cultivator landed in front of the carriage. He swept his eyes over the old and lame horses and frowned. He slowly said, Give me the ice fox, and you may leave. Xiang Shui reached out a hand and took the ice fox off her shoulder. I'll give it to you. The cold-faced cultivator didn't think things would be so simple. He looked at her deeply before taking the ice fox and walking away. Xiang Shui picked up her whip and struck the shaft of the carriage. The old and lame horses spun around and began to pull the carriage around the people in front of them. Shang Junjun held onto the ice fox, a bright smile on her face. Thank you, Brother Yun. I like this ice fox very much, and I can't wait to bond with it. I don't even want to continue walking. Fanbo was annoyed that Yunzhan had taken the first step. Now that he heard this, he immediately said, If Jun Junxi doesn't want to walk, she can take the carriage. Hurry up and stop and give us the carriage. Xiang Shui frowned. You said just now that we would leave after handing over the ice fox. Fanbo impatiently sneered. You can still leave now, but if you continue talking, that might not be the case. Chapter 993. Xiang Shui pursed her lips. Fine. Just as the words left his mouth, he was interrupted. A slightly helpless and somewhat amused voice came from the carriage. When did you become so easily bullied? This is the first time I've seen one. Xiang Shui's tensed body relaxed. She immediately turned her head and gritted her teeth. It's all because of you, the Zodiac, sleeping until now. Otherwise, why would I feel so wronged? Her tone was vicious, but the joy in her eyes still warmed Qin Yu's heart. He never thought that solving the last question of the rules would cause him to consume so much energy. He had lasted until the moment he solved the question and then fainted. If it wasn't for Xiang Shui, during this period of time, he didn't have the strength to resist, and who knew what kind of outcome he would have. Qin Yu smiled and pushed open the door. He jumped off the carriage and said, Don't worry, I will help you vent your anger now. Although the young men and women in the lead were unbridled and overbearing, most of them came from extraordinary backgrounds. The environment that they grew up in determined that they had good eyesight. Naturally, they could see that as the man in the carriage spoke, Xiang Shui suddenly relaxed. It seemed that after he woke up, all the problems would no longer be a problem. But why? Are we so easy to deal with in your eyes? Hee. And he was relying on a junior who was not even at the divine realm. How ridiculous. He still wants to vent his anger? How do you want to vent your anger? Smash your head against the ground, rub your face against it, and make us laugh to death? Shang Junjun lowered her eyelids, revealing a look of fear. Let's not. He's already angry. I'll return the ice fox. Let's not have a conflict. These words were simply intolerable, even though they knew very well that Shang Junjun's current behavior was 99% an act for them to see. The key point was that since they wanted to pursue Shang Junjun and climb up her clan brother's coattails, even if they were dissatisfied with being used like fools, they still had to put on a positive attitude of being willing to do anything for Miss Junjun. Yunjan and Fanbo's behavior could be said to be like teaching a lesson. Their faces were filled with rage, and their eyes were filled with expressions that said, "You don't know what's good for you. You dare to make Miss Junjun feel uneasy. You deserve to die 10,000 times over. Kid, you should be clear about the principle of enduring for a while to be calm, right? Being able to live is something worth cherishing. You should think this through," said Fanbo coolly. Every word he said was filled with condescension. Previously, Yunjan had already fallen behind a little. Now, he naturally had to put in more effort to get back Miss Junjun's attention. Why waste time with them? Since they dared to speak rudely to Miss Junjun, they naturally deserved to be punished. He sneered and waved his hand. "Go, capture this brat, and hand him over to Miss Junjun." In today's world, there was no such thing as absolute safety. Young ladies and gentlemen from rich and influential families would naturally bring along strong guards when they went out. They could be used to show off in daily life and could also be used to save lives in critical moments. Naturally, they were essential for traveling at home. What's more, he, Fanbo, can bring his own guards. Am I, Yunjan, any worse than him? Humph. Now is the time to display the strength of my Yun family. Seeing the young master's gaze, the Yun family guard naturally knew what he had to do next. He had to help the young master gain the limelight. The Yun family guard nodded imperceptibly and stepped forwards. His tall and burly figure was expressionless, like a cold mountain. He stretched out a palm the size of Fan and pressed down. He wanted to crush this brat to the ground and crush all of his bones. He would make him wail on the ground like a pile of mud. Only like this would he be able to fully display the prestige and overbearingness of his Yun family. Of course, the reason the guard dared to do this was because he had already received information about Shang Junjun that his family had collected. This young lady with a gentle name seemed as delicate as a white rabbit, but the truth was that her heart was actually filled with a cruel and ruthless soul. This little scene in front of her could at most make her slightly excited. It was impossible for it to frighten her. With a loud bang, the earth shook and the ground beneath Qin Yu's feet began to disintegrate. His entire body seemed to shrink as he was pressed into the broken earth. Yunjan's eyebrows arched up. The arrogant attitude he revealed immediately froze on his face, and his eyes subconsciously widened. Those young men and women who had been sneering and waiting for a good show to begin were all frozen in place like puppets. There is quite a bit of movement, but the strength of your palm clearly isn't much at all. Qin Yu reached out a hand and flicked away some ashes on his black robes. His lips curved up in a cold and callous smile. "Although I didn't need to fear you to begin with, it would have been better if I could have been in the right. But now, you were the one who attacked me first, so everything that follows can only be considered my counterattack in self-defense." Qin Yu pulled his feet out from the ground. He looked at the dignified and bewildered Yun family guard and said, "Are you ready? I'm going to attack." "Humph." The Yun family guard sneered. "You're just trying to play tricks on us. It's just that your mortal body is a bit stronger, and I haven't used my full strength yet. I want to see." Qin Yu didn't wait for the guard to finish speaking before he attacked. His fist punched out, and the scene in front of him immediately distorted. The surrounding air seemed to crazily compress, condensing into a nearly tangible mass that howled out. Bang! The Yun family's guard, who was tall and sturdy like a mountain range, didn't even have the chance to groan before he was sent flying by the hammer. Blood gushed out from every orifice of his body. With a plop sound, he fell to the ground and turned into a pile of mud. "Looking at your momentum just now, you should have wanted to do this to me, right? Unfortunately, your strength is a bit lacking, so you shouldn't resent me for being beaten up like this." As Qin Yu finished speaking, he looked across at the group of young men and women who looked like frosted eggplants. He looked at their pale faces and smiled. "I'm a very reasonable person. If I said I would vent my anger, then I will. So, you had best vent your anger for the little maid behind me. Otherwise, I will be in a difficult position, and you will all feel even more uncomfortable." This sort of calm and unruffled manner, using a light and mocking tone to express their condescending attitude, had always been what people like them excelled at. Now that it was being used on someone else, it didn't feel good at all. But even if they didn't feel good, they could only endure it. That Yin family guard whose life or death was unknown was a good example placed in front of them. No one wanted to suffer the same fate as him. Yin Zhan's lips trembled. He was angry, but he was even more afraid. The reason he came out this time was because he was ordered to pursue the young miss of the Shang family. His family would certainly give him the greatest degree of support. So, the guard beside him was called Yin Dapeng. If he was given a name by his family, he certainly wasn't an ordinary character. In fact, several days ago, Yin Dapeng had been following beside the patriarch and was responsible for his safety. But now, in Yin Zhan's imagination, the most eye-catching bodyguard who could bring him so much honor and glory was dealt with by a single slap like a chicken or a stray dog. Just what sort of strength did this require? Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. This was absolutely pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Looking at Qin Yu again, it wasn't just Yin Zhan. Everyone looked at him as if they were looking at some old thing that was hiding his strength. Of course it was that old thing. Otherwise, how could he possibly be so strong? After all, we are all geniuses. Those that are stronger than us must be those that have cultivated for a longer period of time. Besides that, there is no other possibility. That's right. Even if we are anxious and fearful right now, we are still proud and confident. Shang Junjun's mouth fell open, a look of fear on her face. Just by looking at her, one couldn't help but feel pity for her. Brother Yin, I am afraid. Yin Zhan's body stiffened. He cursed inwardly. Whether or not she did this on purpose, with these words, it was impossible for him to remain silent with everyone else. After all, the person that was hammered to the ground and whose life or death was unknown was a guard of the Yin family. If he didn't dare to say a single word after being called out, then he really would become a joke. Taking a deep breath, Yin Zhan squeezed out a smile and said, Miss Junjun, don't be afraid. Today is just a misunderstanding. As long as we can explain it, there will naturally be no more problems. He stepped forwards and cupped his hands together. Fellow Taoist, how are you? I am a junior of the Eight Lakes Yin family. Today, we didn't get to know each other without fighting. If there is any misunderstanding, I ask that you don't take offense. Don't you think this is a bit shameful and will cause Shang Junjun to look down on you? Bah, if she looks down on me, then she looks down on me. How could that be more important than my life? This person in front of me had attacked in a dark and heavy manner. He didn't dare to bet that the name of the Yin family would be able to shake him. If he failed to show off and ended up being F***head instead, he wouldn't even have a place to cry to. Qin Yu glanced at him. The one who attacked just now, was it your guard? Yin Zhan nodded. He scared me. To be more accurate, he scared the little maid behind me. But I dote on her a great deal, so this is even more serious than scaring me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yin Zhan continued to nod. Qin Yu snapped his fingers. I like to speak with smart people, and you brat are smart enough. So, come and express your sincerity. As long as my family's little maid is satisfied, then we can forget about the matter between us. Yin Zhan hesitated. He felt that if he were to obediently listen to Qin Yu after he had already announced his background, then he would lose a bit too much face. His lips moved, but before he could speak, he could feel Qin Yu's eyes light up with encouragement. His heart skipped a beat. Then it fiercely shrank, as if a giant invisible hand had grasped him. All right, I'll go over now. Yin Zhan lowered his head and walked over. His face was burning hot, but he rejoiced inwardly. He was very sure that if he spoke another word, he would surely be captured, and at that time, he would absolutely have to pay an even greater price. Qin Yu nodded. I told you I didn't see wrong. You brat, you are a smart fellow. First chat with my little maid, then I'll continue to settle the score. He lifted a hand and pointed forward. Yes, don't look around, it's you. While I was half awake just now, I heard that you sent someone to take the ice fox away. This matter has caused tremendous psychological damage to my little maid. How do you think we should resolve this? Fan Bo looked like he had been smeared with hot feces. He thought that if he was strong enough, he could just slap Qin Yu away. How the hell was he supposed to resolve this? But unfortunately, he didn't have the strength to do so. So, He could only give up on these thoughts. He swept his eyes over his family's cold-faced guard. His body stiffened, and a pleading look appeared in his eyes. "Young master, please don't make me do anything. Otherwise, what's the difference between that and asking me to die?" Thus, Fambo immediately understood that it was time to lower his head. In any case, Yin Zhan was in front of him. Even if he were to fall to the ground, he wouldn't be the most shameful one. The juniors of great families, besides a few arrogant and conceited young masters who didn't know what was good for them, most of them had self-control. They all understood that a man or a woman had to be flexible. Fambo took a deep breath and respectfully bowed. "I'm deeply sorry for what happened before. I guarantee to fellow Taoists that I will do my best to obtain this misforgiveness." As he spoke, he strode over. Shang Junjun nearly blew up with anger. Although she didn't like these two brats from the start, their performance was a bit too shameful. That's right, this person is a bit fierce, but what background do we have? Even if he ate a bear's heart or a leopard's gall, would he really dare to attack us? You two spineless cowards are simply trash to the extreme. Facing Qin Yu's gaze, Shang Junjun slightly tightened her grip on an excited-eyed fox that wanted to break free. She said in a soft voice, "Little thing, what are you panicking about? If I don't let you go, you won't be able to go anywhere." Qin Yu raised an eyebrow. This little girl across from him was deliberately saying this for him to hear. It seemed that she had made up her mind to stand firm. But as a girl, even if she wanted to stand firm, what could she bring out to do so? However, he didn't plan on letting her off so easily to begin with. A woman who had a peaceful expression on her face, but was actually a sinister and sinister woman was the most detestable of all. Genius in a second remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 994. Miss Junjun, my name is Shang Junjun. You seem to have a great backing. My background is like this, so there's nothing I can do about it. Qin Yu smiled. I wonder, what is your background? Shang Yang, Shang family. Shang Junjun said in a soft voice. Her face revealed a subtle expression that said, "I'm so fierce. Are you afraid?" Although she tried her best to appear calm, she was still a little girl. No matter how much she tried to hide it, she couldn't hide it at all. But unfortunately, a Shang family that could make an entire city be named after their family. No matter how fierce they were, to Qin Yu and Xiang Shui, they weren't deterred at all. This was because they didn't know what sort of place Merchant City was, so they naturally didn't know what a so-called Shang family was. Shang Junjun's expression froze. She discovered that the man with the evil smile and the woman with the seductive face had calm expressions. They didn't respond at all to her mentioning the Shang family. This didn't seem like a disguise. Could it be that they came from some remote place and had never heard of the reputation of the Shang family? Shang Junjun furrowed her eyebrows. These people that came from remote villages and didn't have much experience were more difficult to deal with. Because they were ignorant, they were fearless and did things without scruples. It seemed that she could only bring up her cousin. With her cousin's status, no matter how remote they were, they must have heard of him. Taking a deep breath, Shang Junjun slowly straightened her back. There was a bit more of an indifference around her. My elder brother's name is Shang Linghua. He entered the Peach Blossom Spring and is an elder's disciple. Right now, he is an honored guest of the Eastern Zhou family. I came here on my father's orders to pay my respects to my cousin. Before I left, I'd already arranged a letter with my elder brother. If I am late, I fear my elder brother will come looking for me. At that time, you might not be able to explain yourself. You don't know about Merchant City, you don't know about Shang family, but looking at the existence of the Peach Blossom Spring, how many cultivators wouldn't revere it? You want me to lower my head like trash like Yin Zhan and Fanbo? Dream on. Now, I fear it is your turn to feel fear in front of me. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. He slowly said, Your elder brother entered the Peach Blossom Spring? Shang Junjun raised her neck, white and clean like a swan. With an almost imperceptible movement, she gently nodded. So that you know that it is so. Qin Yu looked at her, his eyes bright and earnest. His reasoning told him that the grudge between him and the Peach Blossom Spring shouldn't involve a little girl who only had an indirect relationship with him. Moreover, if this matter wasn't handled properly, it might lead to trouble. However, if one's rationality could always control one's thoughts and actions, then there wouldn't be so many messy things happening in the world. Chinyu was certain that he wasn't a messy person, but sometimes he couldn't completely control his own actions. So that's how it is. What a coincidence, Chinyu said softly. As Xiang Shui was speaking with Yun Zhan and Fan Bo, she suddenly frowned. She had never heard of the Peach Blossom Spring before, but her intuition told her that Chinyu's reaction was a bit abnormal after hearing this name. Without waiting for her to think further, Chinyu continued to speak in a gentle tone. I have naturally heard of the prestige of the Peach Blossom Spring. Deep in my heart, I am filled with awe. Since we have this relationship, I won't make things difficult for you. First, exchange for the ice fox. Second, solemnly apologize to my little maid. Shang Junjun's face was filled with anger and shock. Impossible. Chinyu ignored her. He continued to say, there is also the third thing. Wait a moment and take out 3 times the compensation they gave to my maid. He raised 3 fingers, his eyes calm. Remember this well. You can't miss any of the 3 conditions I mentioned. Otherwise, I'm very sure that you'll feel extremely uncomfortable later on. Don't doubt my attitude. Toward a girl like you who has such a great contrast in appearance, I will not be lenient. Shang Junjun felt as if she would explode from anger. Of course, she didn't know that not too long ago, Chinyu had nearly caused a stone pagoda to explode from anger. Sometimes, even he didn't know just how talented he was in angering others. But this time, Shang Junjun didn't dare to act out. Her reasoning told her that this man in front of her, with a gentle tone and a calm expression, really wasn't trying to scare her. But just what was his background? What was his background? He was someone who didn't even know the Shang family. So how could he treat her like this? In particular, she learned of her cousin who was so eye-catching that the entire Shang family had benefited from him. Although she couldn't figure it out, the situation was beyond her control. Shang Junjun's breathing was rapid and deep. Her chest constantly rose and fell. So much so that one worried that the buttons on her chest would snap and fall off. Thus, it was a hair-raising sight. But to lower her head like this was far too shameful. In particular, the eyes of Yun Zhan, Fan Bo, and the others, as well as those little fox spirits that flattered her, made it increasingly difficult for her to accept this. Shang Junjun's face tightened. She coldly said, I can agree to all of your conditions, but because of this, you will become someone I don't welcome. If there is a chance in the future, I will definitely take action and demand everything you took from me today. Chinyu smiled. Of course, you have a right to do so. If there is a chance, I will look forward to it. The group of young men and women quickly left after obtaining permission. Although their backs were a bit panicked, only a small number of them were in a sorry state. Thinking about it, this shocking matter would soon spread through their circles and become the topic of conversation for countless people. Compared to them, Yun Zhan and Fan Bo were better off. Men knew when to yield and when to stand tall. Perhaps they would be looked upon more favorably by others. But Shang Junjun, did you hear? That concubine daughter of the Shang family relied on her good relationship with her cousin to strut around. But now, she had suffered a great setback, and her face was completely stripped off. She was truly in a sorry state. After all, the schemes and plots between women were much more intense. And during this period of time, Shang Junjun had indeed offended many people. Watching these people leave, Chinyu turned and looked at Xiang Shui, who was grinning from ear to ear. Xiang Shui was hugging the ice fox and calling it baby, baby, baby. He smiled and said, Are you satisfied with this method of venting your anger? Satisfied, satisfied. Xiang Shui beamed with joy, revealing her beautiful white teeth. You are so smart. Fighting and killing is so bloody. How can it be as comfortable as extorting others? But I think that little Shang girl has some background. You made her lose face today, so I'm afraid she will take revenge. And most importantly, you will be going to the East Zhou family. You will definitely meet again. Chinyu nodded. I know. Xiang Shui curled her lips. You know it's not good to provoke her, but you still provoked her. Is it because your ego is too inflated? Or is there something I don't know about? Qin Yu sensed the seriousness in her eyes. He thought for a moment and said, "A bit of both. You've already said that I have a heaven-defying teacher. Previously, those people in the God-confining gorge probably believed it. Now, they've spread a lot of fame for me. If I have to retreat in front of the younger sister of an unknown disciple of the Peach Blossom Spring, others definitely won't believe me." "You have a grudge with the Peach Blossom Spring?" Xiang Shui suddenly asked. One couldn't help but admit that a woman's intuition was so accurate that it made one break out in a cold sweat. Qin Yu thought for a moment. He felt that it was best not to tell her about this matter for the time being. After all, besides worrying, there wasn't any help at all. Moreover, if Xiang Shui revealed a flaw in her disguise and someone noticed something was wrong, then things would become troublesome. So he smiled and shook his head in a perfunctory manner. "There's no such thing." Xiang Shui rolled her eyes. "Who are you trying to fool?" But since Qin Yu didn't want to say it, she didn't continue asking. She just secretly decided that she would pay extra attention to news about the Peach Blossom Spring in the future. At the very least, she had to find out just who the other party was. This Qin Yu brat, he was much more troublesome than she had imagined. She didn't know where a powerful opponent would pop out from. If he wasn't strong enough and lucky enough, he would have been killed long ago. Qin Yu rapped her on the forehead. "I can tell with a single glance that you're definitely not thinking about me. You should already know the coordinates of the Eastern Zhou family. Let's hurry over. We're already the last group to arrive, so don't miss the proper business." The lame horse and the old horse neighed, expressing their welcome to Qin Yu. Then they moved their hooves, each step deep and shallow as they pulled the carriage forwards. The opening of the Myriad Soul Dao was approaching. Eastern Zhou Jolly had no choice but to stop her seclusion and begin to accept the guidance of the various seniors that her family had hired with a great deal of money. Although these people hadn't smoothly obtained the inheritance of the Myriad Soul Dao, they had still personally experienced it. And these experiences were incomparably precious to Eastern Zhou Jolly. After several hours of conversation, Eastern Zhou Jolly respectfully sent off the cultivators in front of her. Then, she stood up and gently rubbed her temples. There were far too many things that she needed to remember, and she had to screen them. After all, the Myriad Soul Dao was known for its infinite transformations. Who knew whether or not the things that these people said were true? After all, disregarding the sinister winds within her family, even her enemies of the Eastern Zhou family absolutely didn't want to see her smoothly obtain the inheritance of the Myriad Soul Dao. It was impossible to rule out the possibility that they had done something to her. Miracle Doctor Yi pushed open the door and entered. He cupped his hands together and bowed. Mississippi Eastern Zhou Jolly looked over. "How is it?" Miracle Doctor Yi shook his head. Eastern Zhou Jolly sighed. She let out a long breath. "It looks like my luck wasn't good enough. I wasn't able to obtain this mister's help." Miracle Doctor Yi comforted her. "Miss has already made all the necessary preparations. Even if you can't find Qin Yu, well, although I know that it can't be the same person, I still feel a bit uncomfortable mentioning this name. In short, Miss will definitely succeed." Eastern Zhou Jolly smiled. "I hope so." The first time she heard this name, even she felt incredulous. But she soon suppressed some unrealistic thoughts in her heart. It was the same name, but it was impossible for it to be the same person. After all, even though Qin Yu's performance was breathtaking and even stirred her heart, how could he be compared to that person in the God-forbidding gorge? Whatever. If the Eastern Zhou family couldn't find him, then her other competitors likely wouldn't be able to either. Then everyone would have to rely on their own methods. And she wasn't without advantages. "Old Yi, I heard that Brother Shang's favorite little sister has arrived. Today, I will hold a banquet to personally welcome her." Old Yi cupped his hands together. "Yes, miss." And at this time, the person that Eastern Zhou Jolly and everyone else had been searching for all this time was comfortably sitting in a carriage and arriving at the Eastern Zhou family's camp. In front of them wasn't a city, but a vast expanse of buildings that stretched out endlessly. The scale was vast and magnificent. There were no walls built because there was no need, because this entire world was under the control of the Eastern Zhou family. They were a giant existence that directly or indirectly controlled 100 worlds. If they couldn't even manage their headquarters well and were still invaded by others, then they really might as well buy a piece of soft white tofu and smash their head against it to death. A Genius Remembers website address. Mobile version. Chapter 995. Between the endless clusters of buildings, several invisible auras shot into the heavens. They were like towering mountains that emitted an endless pressure. This was the strength that the Eastern Zhou family clan had placed on the surface to deter all others. But Qinyu didn't doubt that they were hiding even more. They were truly worthy of being called a giant-level existence that ruled over 100 worlds. The strength and background they possessed were unimaginably terrifying. Xiang Shui tapped the shaft of the carriage. When the old horse and lame horse stopped, she turned and said, "We've arrived. What should we do next?" Qinyu smiled. "Of course we need to find a place to stay first." That's it. Xiang Shui curled her lips. "When did you learn to play these mysterious tricks? You clearly want to run up to them right now, but you still act so stubbornly." Qinyu thought to himself, "If you speak so bluntly, aren't you afraid that I'll fly into a rage out of shame and teach you a lesson?" He humphed. "You don't understand." Although everything Xiang Shui said was correct, and he was indeed incomparably eager, he couldn't really rush up to them on his own initiative. Otherwise, why would he need to show off so much in the God-forgetting gorge? Qinyu had to ensure that he was invited by the Eastern Zhou family clan on their own initiative. This would reduce a great deal of trouble in the future and allow him to occupy a relatively active position. As the carriage continued forward, in the core region of the Eastern Zhou family clan, in a grand hall, a banquet was being held. Eastern Zhou Jolly personally accompanied the guests, drinking with a man across from her. From time to time, she would turn and speak with a beautiful and petite woman to her side so that she wouldn't feel left out. The atmosphere of the entire banquet was excellent. It continued for 4 hours. After the host and guests chatted for a moment, they all happily dispersed. Eastern Zhou Jolly stood up and sent the two people out with a smile. The man's back was straight, and his eyes were calm and tranquil. His gaze occasionally fell on her, revealing a bit of appreciation and praise. The woman beside him tried her best to appear calm, but there was an unconcealable cautiousness in her expression. After all, she had always been proud of her background. Compared to Eastern Zhou Jolly, the difference was like the difference between mud and clouds. If it weren't for her cousin, she probably wouldn't have the qualifications to be invited to a banquet by the other party in this lifetime. Not to mention, the other party was extremely gentle to her throughout the entire banquet, making her feel like she was bathing in the spring breeze. Subconsciously, she had a good impression of him. After bidding farewell to her master, the man walked in front while she followed behind him with her head lowered. She had retracted her bared fangs and brandished claws, becoming incomparably gentle. At this moment, the man suddenly spoke. "Little sister, I heard that you ran into some trouble 2 days ago. You finally asked me." Shang Junjun's mind shook. Ever since she came to Shang Clan, she had never mentioned it, because she was sure that her brother would hear about it through other channels. Humph. To be able to be questioned by my elder brother so quickly, I have to thank those little hussies who are gossiping behind my back. But on the surface, her pretty face was slightly flushed, revealing a trace of embarrassment, shame, and then an expression of forbearance. "No, nothing." Shang Lingyue glanced at her. "These years, you have indeed been too arrogant. It is a good thing to be taught a lesson. It can sharpen your temper and let you know that there is always someone better out there, so that you won't get into big trouble in the future." After a slight pause, he continued, "From today onwards, let Third Shadow stay by your side and help you deal with some trivial matters, so that your mood won't be spoiled by others. Go out and have a good stroll. There are still many fun places in the Eastern Zhou clan's territory." Shang Junjun respectfully bowed. "Yes, elder brother." Joy appeared in her eyes. Although on the surface, She was reprimanded by Shang Lingyue, but her cousin still cared about her. Otherwise, why would he arrange for Third Shadow to be with her? One had to know that this was a close guard that only disciples of Peach Blossom Spring had the qualifications to obtain. His strength was incomparably strong. If Third Shadow had been by her side, how could she have been humiliated by that brat? You, and the little slut beside you, better not let me see you again. Otherwise, I will definitely let you know what fear and regret is. Third Shadow wore a mask, so his appearance couldn't be seen clearly. Only a pair of cold eyes could be seen. They were like two round balls polished from ice, without the slightest fluctuation of emotions. He was just standing there, motionless, but everyone could feel a cold chill gushing out from the depths of their hearts. It was as if he was a bloodthirsty hunting beast in hibernation. Once he opened his sharp teeth and claws, he would destroy everything. Shang Junjun held a gathering in the name of bonding. Because of the existence of Third Shadow, he was in the limelight at the gathering. In particular, after someone at the gathering pointed out that Shadow 3 came from the Peach Blossom Spring that transcended the outside world, the respect and envy Shang Junjun received increased by several times. So the rumors were true. The Shang clan had really produced a peerless genius that entered Peach Blossom Spring. And this genius was Shang Junjun's cousin. The two of them had a close relationship since young and doted on her. Now it seemed that this was indeed the case. Otherwise, why would he send his guards to follow beside Shang Junjun? This was obviously to support Shang Junjun. After today, the news that was circulating in the dark would soon disappear without a trace. Shang Junjun's wounded heart was greatly healed and satisfied. There was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth as she accepted everyone's direct and subtle compliments. But even though she had once again received the respect of these people, there was still a trace of regret in the depths of her heart. That brat, since he knew that her brother was a guest at the Dongzhou clan, naturally did not dare to come near. Most likely, he had escaped to some faraway place. Even if she wanted to meet him again, the chances were slim. Who knew when she could vent the anger in her heart? Perhaps she should think of a way to let her cousin personally ask the Dongzhou clan to help find that brat. With the strength of the Dongzhou clan, as long as they acted, it would be an inescapable net. No matter where that brat escaped to, he would definitely not be able to hide. When I go back, I will find a chance to ask my cousin for help. What kind of status do I have? How can I not take revenge after being humiliated by you? As she thought of this, Shang Junjun felt that today's banquet seemed to be meaningless. Of course, she had already shown off what she could and had let these people know once again what the gap between them was. There was no loss in leaving now. Just as Shang Junjun was about to open her mouth and leave, she suddenly stopped in her tracks and stared outside at a horse carriage coming up the long street. Several young men surrounding her who were constantly fawning over her immediately sensed her abnormality. Following her gaze, their expressions also changed. As the center of the entire banquet, the performance of Shang Junjun and the few people around her quickly spread. After a few breaths, the lively banquet fell into a silent silence. Everyone looked at the horse carriage on the long street that was approaching unhurriedly. Even though they kept telling themselves that they had to remain calm, their slightly distorted faces still showed the restless emotions in their hearts. Some of the young ladies who had watched Shang Junjun put on a show all raised their hands to cover their mouths and exclaimed softly, their eyes brightening. Although it hadn't been long, the news of Shang Junjun being ruthlessly humiliated and losing face had already spread like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know who the person who didn't fear the reputation of the Peach Blossom Spring was and who pressed her to the ground and rubbed her. But it was a pity that on that day, no one had been able to figure out the other party's strength and identity information was a complete blank. Therefore, perhaps out of curiosity, there were countless versions of this person's appearance and the information that circulated. It was a very ordinary horse carriage with a thin layer of dust on its surface. It was obvious that it had traveled a long distance. There were two very special horses pulling the carriage. One was very old. Its fur had lost its luster, and its eyelids were drooping. However, It liked to show that it was still full of energy and liked to tease the other horse from time to time. The other horse beside it was lame. It was unknown what happened to this lame horse. Its left front hoof was injured and it limped when it walked. However, it was very stable when it pulled the carriage. Furthermore, it was incomparably arrogant and didn't care about the old horse's attempts to get close to it. If it came a little closer, it would open its mouth and bite down mercilessly. The one driving the carriage was a young maid. Her appearance was extremely beautiful, and there was a hint of coquettishness in her eyes. When one looked at her, they couldn't help but feel a fire burning in their hearts. Although there were some discrepancies between the different versions, it was roughly the same content that everyone had heard countless times. Therefore, as they looked at the horse carriage on the long street, everyone silently compared it, and their expressions became more and more interesting. The carriage was very ordinary and covered in dust. The horses pulling the carriage were the same, one old and one lame. The one driving the carriage was also a woman. Although it was a little far away and her appearance was a little blurry, the coquettish aura in the haze couldn't be concealed. Of course, more importantly, Shang Junjun's expression was fluctuating at this moment. No one was blind. How could they not see that her face was dark and gloomy, and that she was almost biting her white teeth to pieces? Could it really be such a coincidence? It couldn't be. Shang Junjun had borrowed the powerful guards of her cousin today to show off in front of everyone and save her face. What was the meaning of her appearing now? Even if it was a coincidence, it couldn't be so coincidental. Compared to this, face slapping and whatnot was child's play. What he was doing was directly raising his feet and jumping on people's faces. But no matter what, one thing was certain. There was going to be a good show to watch. Not only because the Easter Zhou family's encampment strictly forbade all personal fights, but also because did this ruthless person who dared to not give Shang Junjun face and directly pressed her down on the ground have no background? Don't forget, Shang Junjun had said that this person clearly knew that Shang Lingyue was here, yet he still casually came. What did this mean? TSK. It seemed that this person was also an absolute strong person. He didn't even put her in his heart. Interesting, very interesting. Shang Junjun took a deep breath, her chest rising high, revealing a shocking curve. She turned around and swept her eyes across the crowd, the corners of her mouth curling up slightly. It seems that regarding the embarrassing matter that Junjun experienced that day, everyone already knows. Then I won't waste my breath explaining. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes turn especially red. Although I don't have any deep enmity with this person, but any enmity is enmity. Since we've met, of course we can't pretend not to see each other. So I must make a move and get back at him. She glanced at Ing San, who was quietly standing behind her like a shadow. His aura didn't fluctuate at all. She said softly, I remember that brother once mentioned to me that out of respect for his identity, the Eastern Zhou family has given you all special privileges. When faced with an unexpected situation, you can act on your own, right? Ing San's cold voice sounded out from beneath his mask. Yes. Shang Junjun smiled. Very good. Then what are you waiting for? Make a move now. Bring the two people in that carriage to me. Ing San cupped his hands together and stepped out. Outside the restaurant, there was an array formation that could block out wind and sand. This was to give guests a better dining experience and enjoyment, and it also had excellent defensive capabilities. After all, this was a restaurant used by cultivators. If it was too weak, then wouldn't it need to be constantly repaired? But now, this array only lit up slightly before it was directly torn apart like a bubble. The runes tumbled and dissipated. With the sharp sound of an alarm, Ing San crossed the street and arrived above the carriage. He lifted a hand and pressed down. Chapter 996. I am Shadow 3, from the Peach Blossom Land. I was ordered to follow my disciple Shang Lingyue and become a shadow. I have to follow his will and treat him as my master forever. Actually, many years ago, I also had the chance to become a disciple of the Peach Blossom Land. Unfortunately, I failed by a hair's breadth. In order to stay in the Peach Blossom Land, I willingly became a shadow guard. My name is Shadow 3. This 3 represents my strength. In the entire shadow guard system, I am ranked 3rd. I'm not bragging. Being ranked 3rd is really amazing. So, at the start, I didn't really care about Shang Lingwei. Although I was respectful to him, it was only because the hierarchy of the Peach Blossom Land didn't allow for provocation. Later on, I discovered that Shang Lingyue was hiding his true potential and ambition under his ordinary appearance. Only then did I accept him and treat him as my master. Although I didn't understand why he would care so much about his sister who wasn't related to him, out of respect for Shang Lingyue, I would still follow his will and listen to Shang Junjun's orders. So, after she clearly expressed her attitude, I didn't hesitate to make a move. At that moment, I jumped out and instantly smashed the restriction formation outside the restaurant. In the blink of an eye, I was on the long street and above the carriage. My gaze landed on the surface of the carriage. It must be really, really cold, because the cultivator in the carriage didn't just insult Shang Junjun. He also showed a provocation towards the Peach Blossom Land. Knowing that Shang Lingyue was here, he still dared to swagger over. It was obvious that he didn't care about him at all, no matter if the other party was really strong or if he didn't know how high the heavens were. As Shang Lingyue's shadow guard, he couldn't hold back. Originally, I thought that even if the other party had a big background, it couldn't compare to the Peach Blossom Land behind him. However, what happened next proved that I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. This carriage and the person it represented were indeed not to be trifled with. Actually, the moment I made my move, I already felt it, because when I used all my strength, it felt like I was punching a mountain. The rebounding force was like a river bursting its banks, surging towards me. It was endless. So, after a loud sound, I was sent flying and my nose was filled with blood. Inside and outside the restaurant, the entire street suddenly fell silent. The confused cultivator slightly opened his mouth. What was going on? You took the initiative to jump out and make a move, but in the blink of an eye, before you could even do anything, you were sent flying. Blood gushed out from every orifice of your head like it was free. Although seeing you spurt out blood is a very exciting thing, you should at least let us know what is going on in front of us, right? Inside the restaurant, those who heard Shang Junjun's words and knew what had happened were even more shocked by the scene before them. Even though it was the first time Shadow 3 had met him, but with his identity, he was bound to be tyrannical. After all, he was from the Peach Blossom Spring. But now, with a single strike, he had been reduced to such a sorry state. No, to be exact, he hadn't even shown his face, but he had already caused 3 shadow hammers to spit out blood. This was obviously even more terrifying. Schwa, schwa. Many gazes landed on the long street, on the carriage that had stopped, revealing deep respect. Then, these gazes shifted to Shang Junjun. There was always something strange in their eyes. The general meaning was, who asked you to act so arrogantly? But now you're being pressed to the ground again. Moreover, you're facing downwards, constantly rubbing against each other. Shang Junjun's face certainly hadn't hit the ground, but now it was twisted beyond recognition. It was like this again. In the past, Yinzhan's guard had been defeated in a single strike. And now, Shadow 3 had suffered the same fate. Was your nickname the Terminator Guard? But Shadow 3 came from the Peach Blossom Spring, so he naturally had his own strong points. He wasn't someone that Yun Dapeng could compare with. So, even though he was being hammered until he was bleeding from his nose and mouth, he still tried his best to not appear too distressed. Bang! With a loud explosion, Shadow 3's feet fell to the ground. The ground instantly shattered, and he rapidly retreated, each step leaving behind a deep mark. He stopped with difficulty. His chest shook, and he spat out several mouthfuls of blood before he felt a little better. Shadow 3 looked up. His eyes fell onto the carriage, shaking and freezing. So strong. He took a deep breath and suppressed the shaking in his chest. Shadow 3 slowly said, "Miss, please leave here." He was a shadow guard and had been ordered to follow Shang Junjun. Her safety was his top priority. Now, he no longer had the confidence he could protect her. He was thorough. But Shadow 3 was a shadow guard of the peach blossom spring. To a certain extent, he represented a part of the peach blossom spring. Of course, it was impossible for him to leave after being severely wounded. Even if he wasn't a match and died here, he wouldn't take half a step back. Shang Junjun screamed, "I'm staying here. I'm not going anywhere." Shadow 3 frowned. But thinking that this was the Eastern Zhou family's encampment, he didn't say anything more. His battle with the person in the carriage had already been noticed. No matter what, the Eastern Zhou family wouldn't watch on helplessly as something happened to Shang Junjun. When he spoke up to warn her, he had already fulfilled his duty as a guard. Now it was time to fight for the reputation of the Peach Blossom Spring, even if he died. Taking a deep breath, Shadow 3 straightened his body. He didn't seem to move at all, but there was a loud, crackling sound within his body. His pale face began to turn ruddy at a speed visible to the naked eye, and his aura rapidly rose. In the blink of an eye, he broke through his limits and showed no signs of stopping. To the outside world, the shadow guards of the Peach Blossom Spring were the shadows of their master. At a critical moment, they could die in place of their master. Since they were going to die in place of their master in a moment of danger, how could they not have some desperate methods? Shadow 3 had decided to go all out. Bang, bang. Around his body, streams of air exploded, causing space to distort. Large stretches of peach forest that stretched as far as the eye could see appeared. Now, in this peach forest, pink peach blossoms were in full bloom. Everyone on and off the street could smell the fragrance of peach blossoms. With a loud roar, the peach forest that grew out of the distorted space seemed to be blown away by a strong wind. Countless petals rolled up and gathered, wrapping around the carriage in layers. The rumors about the Peach Blossom Spring were true. There were countless peach trees that bloomed all year round, representing some sort of transcendent great Tao. It was naturally impossible for Shadow 3 to display this great Tao. But the secret technique he used with all his might contained a trace of this great Tao. Even though it was only a small portion, it was still terrifying enough. In the divine realm, there was no match for him. Even ordinary original divinities had to retreat. Within the room, Shang Lingyue, who was cultivating with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. A sharp light burst out from them. Peach Blossom Spring. Schwa. Without any hesitation, he stood up and took a step forwards. His figure instantly vanished. In the next moment, Shang Lingyue's figure appeared beside Shang Junjun. A jade pendant was tied to her waist, its surface emitting light. Big brother. Shang Junjun was overjoyed. Her eyes immediately turned red. Seeing that she was fine, Shang Lingyue's heart calmed down. He nodded and looked at the carriage that was wrapped in countless peach blossoms. His eyebrows immediately furrowed. He was well aware of Shadow 3's strength. For him to be able to force him into a desperate situation, it was clear just how strong he was. Big brother. The one in the carriage is the one who humiliated me in the past. That is why I had Shadow 3 take action, but I never thought things would turn out like this. It was all my fault. I asked for Big Brother's forgiveness. Shang Junjun had a guilty expression on her face. Shang Lingyue comforted her in a soft voice. "It's fine. I'm here." Just as his voice fell, his complexion changed. He looked up at the street. At almost the same time, the incalculable number of peach blossoms that wrapped around the carriage suddenly collapsed, vanishing from sight. Shadow 3, who had a ruddy complexion and an astonishing aura, suddenly felt as if his spine had been pulled out. His essence, energy, and divine scattered, and he slumped to the ground. Schwa. Shang Lingyue's figure appeared beside him. He lifted a hand and took out a pill with lines interweaving into scales, directly placing it in Shadow 3's mouth. Shadow 3's aura immediately stabilized. Although he had inevitably been severely wounded, he had managed to preserve his life. His eyes were filled with gratitude and guilt. "I am incompetent. It isn't worth wasting a treasure pill." Shang Lingyue patted his shoulder. "As long as you are alive, you can help me more." Don't think about these things and just rest well. With a flick of his sleeves, an invisible force sent Shadow 3 to his safe zone. Shang Lingwei stood up and looked up at the quiet carriage. You injure my people. Are you not going to show yourself and explain yourself? His voice was calm, but it was natural and filled with an unquestionable momentum. Xiang Shui jumped off the carriage. She glanced at Shang Lingwei. The man across from her, although his aura wasn't too strong, he still gave her an incomparably dangerous feeling. However, she wasn't nervous at all. Qin Yu's current aura was inexplicably mysterious, and even she couldn't clearly sense it. She didn't think he would suffer a loss. Creak, the carriage opened from the inside, and Qin Yu stepped out. He instantly attracted countless eyes. His expression was calm. He lightly said, "An explanation is needed, but you should be the one to give it to me." Whoosh, within the restaurant. There were loud gasps. When Shang Lingwei appeared just now, they had subconsciously restrained their breathing. It had to be known that he was a disciple of the Peach Blossom Spring, the legendary Peach Blossom Spring. It was because of this that when they heard Qin Yu's forceful words, they felt an intense impact. Shang Junjun sneered. You have no idea of death or danger. Although the others didn't speak, looking at their expressions, they likely had similar thoughts. Shang Lingwei had a calm expression. I didn't know the reason for the conflict between you and my little sister, so I didn't mention it for now. But today, I saw with my own eyes that you nearly killed my shadow guard. He took the initiative to attack, so I can't fight back. Fighting back doesn't require killing. It's just that your skills are inferior. Shang Lingwei narrowed his eyes. Are you saying that if I have enough strength, I can also try to kill you? Qin Yu had no expression. You could try. With the strength of the Peach Blossom Spring, he indeed didn't dare to provoke them. But he was just a mere disciple. Did he have to lower his head? Very good. Shang Lingwei slowly nodded. Then let me experience your strength. At this time, there was the sound of breaking air. A voice shouted out, Brother Shang, please stop. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He looked up and met the woman's gaze. He never thought that there would be such a coincidence that he would see her on the first day. Shua, Shua. With East Zhou Jolly in the lead, several figures fell down. She deeply looked at Qin Yu and then arrived at Shang Lingwei's side. Brother Shang, that person is a friend of mine. He definitely doesn't know who you are. Thus there was a misunderstanding. I asked that senior apprentice brother show mercy. As she spoke, she turned and glared at Qin Yu. Qin Yu, hurry up and apologize to brother Shang. Qin Yu coughed and rubbed his nose. It seemed that he was being looked down upon. But from East Zhou Jolly's point of view, it was clearly for Qin Yu's own good. After all, he was a remote native cultivator of a small world that hadn't even formed an original divinity. Even if he had used some unknown method to arrive here, how could he possibly become enemies with Shang Lingwei? Even if he had outstanding talent, sometimes background was more important than talent. Shang Lingwei frowned. Miss East Zhou, is he really your friend? East Zhou Jolly nodded. I haven't known him for long, but I owe him a great favor. Of course it was a great favor. If it weren't for Qin Yu, she feared she would have already been defeated in the competition, and it would have been impossible for her to obtain the qualifications to enter the Myriad Soul Dao. Shang Lingwei pondered for a moment and said slowly, since that's the case, as long as this person apologizes to my sister Ning San, the matter will be resolved. It was unknown when Shang Junjun had arrived by his side. She pouted when she heard this. But she also knew that since Eastern Zhou Jolly had personally come forward and clearly expressed that she owed Qin Yu a great favor, Shang Lingwei could only give up. After all, she was the daughter of the first wife of the Eastern Zhou clan. In terms of status, she was not inferior to Shang Lingwei. Oof. Even if I can't teach you a lesson, you still have to lower your head in front of me. I want to see how you can continue to be so arrogant. On the long street, inside and outside the restaurant, all the cultivators watching this battle felt disappointed. He thought to himself that they were about to enter the true climax. But with the appearance of the East Zhou Buddhist pair, it was all over. As for whether Qin Yu would lower his head, was there even a need to say it? unless he was a fool who could not understand that Isjo Shari was already protecting him now. There were people who were stubborn, arrogant, and ignorant, but there were very few people who would act foolishly in the face of disaster. It seemed that things would end like this. What a pity. They originally thought that the cultivator in the carriage had some great background and would be able to have a fiery battle with the disciples of the peach blossom spring. But it was clear that the situation was far from what everyone imagined. The long street gradually quietened down. Many eyes fell on Chinyu, revealing a bit of ridicule and mockery. Just now he had put on a brave and arrogant appearance, but now he had to lower his head and admit defeat. This was indeed a bit shameful. But as long as he wasn't the one who was slapped in the face and turned into an idiot, he was still quite happy. Eastjo Buddhist Pear furrowed her eyebrows. Although she hadn't interacted with Chinyu much, she could sense that this boy had a bit of pride in his heart. Now that he was in front of everyone and had to lower his head and apologize, it might be a bit difficult for him. But even if it was difficult, it was better than losing his life. She was well aware of Shang Lingyue's strength. If it weren't for this, her family wouldn't have regarded him with such importance. Seeing Chinyu not move, Eastjo Buddhist Pear sucked in a deep breath. Chinyu, what about face? In the face of life or death, it wasn't worth mentioning at all. If one couldn't even be flexible, then they were just trash. Chapter 997. Helplessness appeared in Qin Yu's eyes. He wanted to become Eastern Zhou Zhili's follower, but in the end, it was because he needed help from her. At this time, he had rejected her good intentions and caused Eastern Zhou Zhili to lose face. No matter how he looked at it, it was a bit inappropriate. But Qin Yu didn't feel too troubled, because someone soon explained things for him. Qin Yu, on the side of the street, a cultivator frowned, as if he were thinking of something he had forgotten. This was because just a moment ago, his brain had been in a state of excitement. Now that it had come to a sudden stop, it was lacking in oxygen and its speed was slow. Thus, he paused for a moment. Only then did he remember why this name gave him an extremely familiar feeling. The cultivator's eyes widened. He looked at Qin Yu, who was calmly standing beside the carriage with a trace of helplessness in his eyes. Tumbling waves rose in his heart. That's right, it was helplessness. It was helplessness. If he hadn't thought of his identity, he might have thought this expression was bitterness and hesitation. But now, he could confirm that Qin Yu was truly feeling helpless about the current situation. No wonder he didn't fear Shang Lingyue, even though he knew he came from the Peach Blossom Land. If he was Qin Yu, then everything could be explained. Qin Yu, it was unknown where, but a cultivator suddenly cried out in alarm. The street suddenly fell silent. As the cultivator was thinking about this, he was secretly annoyed. He shouldn't have thought too much about this. Now that he had caught everyone's attention, it had been snatched away by someone else. I can't wait any longer. I have to speak up right now, otherwise it will be too late. He is Qin Yu, that's Qin Yu. The two consecutive voices caused the huge street to suddenly fall silent. Countless cultivators widened their eyes. As they looked at the black-robed man standing beside the carriage, thunder rumbled in their hearts. During this period of time, the most shocking and eye-catching matter wasn't the little saintess of the underworld illusion. She had created a dance called the Heavenly Demon Dance, a dance that was said to be able to make one's soul lose themselves in it. All right, this dance was indeed captivating. Anyone who had the qualifications to see it would be unable to forget it, and for the next several days, they were left in a daze. However, what was even more unbelievable was that in the God-confining gorge, there was a cultivator who went crazy and tried to solve the question of the rules at least 3 times in a row. When it came to the 99th question, he gave up without exception. Moreover, the most important point was that the God-confining gorge had suddenly disappeared. Everyone had their own guesses as to what this meant, but it was definitely related to that crazy cultivator. That cultivator's name was Qin Yu. Shang Junjun's eyes widened. She looked at Qin Yu beside the carriage. She couldn't associate him with the incomparably powerful and mysterious cultivator she had heard about. He was Qin Yu? He was Qinyu? This was impossible. Shang Lingyue frowned slightly, and his eyes were filled with seriousness. No matter how proud he was in his heart, no matter how much he thought highly of himself, he could not place the person who caused the waves in the God-confining gorge in an extremely important position. He took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in his heart. He looked at Dongzhou Jelly and slowly said, "Miss Dongzhou, is he Qinyu?" This clearly wasn't a simple question of a person's name. Dongzhou Jelly bitterly smiled. As expected, once this name was exposed, it would have a shocking effect. But what a pity he wasn't him, otherwise she wouldn't have to waste so much effort to explain. This friend of mine is indeed called Qinyu, but he should only have the same name as that person in the God-confining gorge. The two of them shouldn't be related. Shang Lingyue's eyebrows relaxed. He nodded and didn't say anything else. Shang Junjun took a deep breath. Her field of vision darkened. It was only then that she discovered that because of her nervousness just now, she had actually suffocated. But this didn't count for anything. As long as Qinyu wasn't that Qinyu, everything was fine. I knew that someone like you couldn't possibly be that extremely powerful existence in the legends. At this time, on the quiet side of the street, a closed shop was suddenly opened from the inside. Several cultivators smiled as they respectfully sent off the person inside. Looking at the signboard of this shop, it seemed to be a shop that dealt with spirit pets and war beasts. It was clear that this shop had considerable defensive capabilities. After the entrance was closed and the spell arrays were activated, it isolated itself from the outside world. Thus, no one noticed the battle between Qinyu and Shadow 3 just now. The group of people were caught off guard. As they arrived on such a quiet street, they were immediately startled. Just what was going on? Without waiting for them to think or ask, the several smiling cultivators hurriedly bowed. "I greet forth, miss." Dongzhou Jelly was ranked fourth amongst the juniors of the Dongzhou family. These people were all servants of the Dongzhou family. Seeing Dongzhou Jelly, who is currently in the limelight and was destined to become one of the rulers of the Dongzhou family in the future, not directly kneeling to the ground was already a sign of flattery. As Dongzhou Jelly was thinking about how to ease the atmosphere, her eyes flashed as she saw several people. "What are you doing?" One of the cultivators respectfully said, "Reporting to fourth miss, a batch of precious spirit beast cubs entered the shop some time ago. The situation isn't too good, so we asked the beast-taming sex Mr. Zhou Pei to help us today. We were just about to send Mr. Zhou away." The beast-taming sex Zhou Pei. This was a name that Dongzhou Jelly had heard before. Or, it was more accurate to say that as long as there was someone that wanted to compete for her position as the last follower, and also someone with relatively outstanding strength, she had already looked up the relevant information ahead of time. This Zhou Pei was one of the more conspicuous ones. His cultivation wasn't weak, and he also had the support of various spirit beasts with him. His overall strength was quite good. Dongzhou Jelly nodded and said, "So, is fellow Taoist Zhou Pei from the beast-taming sect. Nice to meet you." With her status, treating Zhou Pei with such an attitude could already be considered courteous. But what caused Dongzhou Jelly to furrow her eyebrows was that Zhou Pei didn't respond at all. He didn't even respond to her initiative. The complexions of the several cultivators in the spirit pet shop changed. One of them lowered his voice and hurriedly reminded, "Mr. Zhou Pei, fourth miss." Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted. Zhou Pei strode forwards and bowed. His expression was one of pleasant surprise and joy. The joy that surged in his eyes was even thicker than when he saw his parents. "Fellow Taoist Qin, it has only been several dozen days since we parted in the God-forgetting gorge. Fellow Taoist appearance is even greater than before, so you must have had a great harvest. I am truly envious of you." His eyes turned to Xiang Shui, and his smile became even more exaggerated. "Miss Shui, how do you do? Your appearance is becoming more and more beautiful. It just so happens that I recently obtained a bottle of top-quality snow toad cream. When I refined it, the snow toad cream was already 10,000 years old, so it is easy to maintain one's youthful appearance. It just so happens that I can give it to Miss Shui. Only someone as beautiful as a flower is worthy of this treasure." As he spoke, he flipped his hand and took out a blue jade bottle. From its appearance, one could tell that it was of considerable value. He presented it with both hands, his expression full of sincerity, as if he would be heartbroken if she didn't accept it. Of course, this only proved that Zhou Pei's acting skills were top-notch. As for his heartbreak, that was because the treasure had left him. This was a priceless 10,000-year snow toad cream. He'd spent a great deal of effort to obtain it. He originally wanted to curry favor with her, but now all of that had been for naught. Dongzhou Jili's mind was firm and tenacious. At this time, there was a buzzing sound in her mind, and she felt a little dizzy. Previously, she had already looked up information on Zhou Pei, so she knew that he had left the God-forgetting gorge through a sacrificial ritual not too long ago. Moreover, the matter of Zhou Pei offending Qin Yu and being extorted by Qin Yu was only recorded in 2 lines. In other words, Zhou Pei knew that Qin Yu from the God-forgetting gorge, and he was in awe of him. Looking at the scene in front of them, as long as one wasn't mentally retarded, they would be able to come to an unbelievable conclusion. This Qin Yu was that Qin Yu. There was no such thing as having the same name or surname. They were the same person. Taking a deep breath, Dongzhou Jili couldn't help but roll her eyes at Qin Yu. After doing this subconscious action, she realized that it was inappropriate. Her face immediately turned red, but she quickly covered it up. There was anger in her chest. Although everything was just her guess, and it had nothing to do with Qin Yu, she was still a woman. She always had the privilege of being unreasonable. More than that, she couldn't suppress her joy. Qin Yu was Qin Yu. Of course he would help her and become one of her followers. Dongzhou Jili had absolute confidence in this. Even if news of his appearance here was leaked after today, there was absolutely no one who could poach him away. But how'd he do it? What happened in the God-forgetting gorge? He solved the 99th question of the rules at least 3 times, and in the end, the God-forgetting gorge suddenly disappeared. This Qin Yu, she had already seen that he wasn't ordinary, but she didn't think that she would still underestimate him. Qin Yu certainly noticed Dongzhou Jili rolling her eyes at him, as well as her slight anger and joy. As he thought, his previous efforts hadn't been in vain. He was 90% certain that he would be able to become a follower. Thinking of this, his mood improved. As he looked at Zhou Pei in front of him, he felt that his rough face had become much more pleasing to the eye. Qin Yu patted his shoulder and said, "Let bygones be bygones. Put it away, we can't take it." Or could it be that he had already been marked by Qin Yu and his every move was being monitored by someone he couldn't sense? Thinking of this, Zhou Pei's entire body stiffened. His first thought was, "My acting skills are so exquisite, so how did you see through it?" Thinking of this, Zhou Pei's entire body froze. The cold chill in his heart began to spread outwards. "What do you want to do? Qin Yu, just what do you want to do? I've already reached this step, so why are you still like this? When a rabbit is anxious, it will bite, and when a sow is anxious, it will climb a tree. Be careful that you don't go too far. Zhou Pei, will not be able to endure it and will counterattack." Zhou Pei clenched his teeth. He felt as if he were on the verge of exploding. When he looked up and saw Qin Yu's warm and smiling face, he immediately shivered. "No, I can't be impulsive. Living is such a wonderful thing. As long as there is a chance, I can't take the initiative to die." Laughing dryly, Zhou Pei flipped his hand and took out an identical jade bottle. I almost forgot. Back then, that 10,000-year-old snow toad was so fat that it barely managed to refine 2 bottles of snow toad paste. Today, I'll give both to Miss Shui. If you use it sparingly, it can last you many years. I'm sorry, my dear number 2. It's not that your man isn't strong enough. It's just that my opponent is too strong, so I can only endure this humiliation. Qin Yu looked at Zhou Pei, who was forcing a smile, but in truth his heart was dripping blood. To tell the truth, he felt a bit awkward. He wondered if he had been too ruthless. He wanted to tell Zhou Pei that he was being serious and that he had no intention of continuing to extort him. But looking at Zhou Pei's twitching eyebrows and lips, Qin Yu suspected that if he refused again, Zhou Pei might think even more and take out even more things to survive. With a light cough, Qin Yu restrained his expression. He thought to himself that Zhou Pei was willing to do this, but it had nothing to do with him. He turned and said, "Since fellow Taoist, Zhou Pei is so sincere in giving it to me, then accept it." Xiang Shui beamed with joy. Women, no matter how old they were, didn't have the least bit of resistance when it came to beauty. She took the 2 bottles of snow toad cream and sweetly bowed to Zhou Pei. "Then the servant will thank Mr. Zhou in advance." Zhou Pei repeatedly said, "Of course, of course." He moved to the side, avoiding her bow. This woman was the hardest to deal with. If he were to casually accept her bow now, he would surely bear a grudge. Qingyu didn't bother with this person anymore. He stepped forwards and cupped his hands together. "Miss East Zhou, it's been a long time since we last met. I wonder how you have been recently?" East Zhou deeply looked at him. "The Myriad Soul Dao is about to open, and I am fortunate enough to participate. I will be competing with many proud children of heaven, so I am feeling a deep sense of apprehension." Qingyu smiled. "Oh, if that's the case, I wonder if I can lend Miss East Zhou a helping hand. I'm also a bit interested in the Myriad Soul Dao." East Zhou's eyes brightened. "You are most welcome." She could no longer conceal the joy in her heart. A bright smile bloomed on her face. "Qingyu, you have already agreed. You cannot go back on your word. A gentleman's word cannot be taken back." East Zhou turned and said, "Brother Shang, Qingyu and you will both become my companions when I enter the Myriad Soul Dao. I wonder if you can give me face and let bygones be bygones?" Shang Lingyue's eyes darkened. He looked at Qingyu. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "Since Miss East Zhou has spoken, I will let bygones be bygones." He cupped his hands together. "Fellow Taoist Qingyu, I am Shang Lingyue. I hope that we can work together and help Miss East Zhou obtain some harvests." Qingyu cupped his hands together. "Of course." Like this, the storm subsided. Although it was a bit sudden, it was also reasonable. Although he had lost some face, no one would laugh at Shang Lingyue. Rather, they gave him a thumbs up. He came from a noble background and was powerful. Yet, he was able to discard unnecessary face and was able to put it down. He was quite the character. After all, even though no one knew Qinyu's true origins, it was already certain that he had a great background. To form enmity with such a character for some unnecessary reasons wasn't the right choice. East Zhou smiled in satisfaction. "Today, I will set up another banquet to congratulate you two on your friendship and also to welcome Qingyu." Things proceeded more smoothly than planned. Qingyu boarded a carriage and entered the East Zhou clan. And at this time, news of him appearing here had already spread to all sides. The East Zhou clan immediately sent out feelers to confirm Qinyu's identity. He was indeed the one who had caused such a stir in the God-forgetting gorge. This was clearly a good thing. With the clan's preparations and Qinyu's participation, East Zhou's chances of success would be much higher. It was just that they still couldn't clearly investigate Qinyu's background. This became the only doubt in the hearts of the East Zhou clan's high-level figures. The Myriad Soul Dao was an extremely important matter, and no accidents could be allowed. No matter how careful they were, it wouldn't be too excessive. Moreover, in their opinion, the appearance of Qingyu and his servant was too much of a coincidence. It was as if they had come specifically for East Zhou. However, based on the rumors, they didn't seem to have any reason to do so. This matter taught them that boasting too much and being too successful was not necessarily a good thing. Go tell fourth miss that after the banquet ends, she can come here. Yes. The banquet proceeded smoothly. Even Shang Junjun had to squeeze out a smile, even though that smile was uglier than crying. She still couldn't accept the fact that Qingyu was Qingyu. Looking at that calm face in the hall, even though her teeth itched with hatred, she could only endure it. Even her elder brother wasn't willing to rashly become enemies with him. What could she do? Although Shang Lingyue doted on her, she had to be smart herself. If she fanned the flames and made her elder brother become enemies with Qingyu, she would truly be stupid. Divine Dr. Yi accompanied her in the hall. His eyes constantly fell on Qingyu, full of surprise. This boy, he originally thought that he had overestimated him, but he didn't expect that he would be wrong. He still couldn't imagine that the person he had been searching for was actually that extremely weak junior for back then. But there was one thing he could be sure of. With Qin Yu's help, the chances of success would be much higher. This boy was simply the lucky star of the young miss. He was like that back then, and he was still like that now. Thinking about it, with Qin Yu's current status and his powerful and mysterious background, if possible, he could indeed consider for the young miss. If she succeeded and obtained Qin Yu's support, the young miss's position in the clan would truly be as stable as Mount Tai. With this thought, Divine Dr. Ye's eyes gradually brightened. The host and guests were both happy. Shang Lingyue and Qin Yu smiled at each other. Then they drank the wine in their cups and bid their farewells. Eastern Zhou Chali didn't give Divine Dr. Yi a chance to nag about her marriage. After listening to the maid beside her say a few words, she gave some instructions and then left. The Eastern Zhou clan ruled over 100 worlds. Since ancient times, they had been a powerful and influential clan that had existed for hundreds of thousands of years. The clan prospered and flourished, and the number of clansmen was incalculable. Only those with outstanding talent would be recognized by the main sect and receive resources from the clan to be trained. Eastern Zhou Chali was the fourth of her generation to be chosen by the clan. Before her, there were 3 people, and after that there were even more. Generally speaking, there were at least dozens of them. Any one of them had a chance of standing out from the crowd. Although Eastern Zhou Chali had her father's shadow, and she herself was outstanding enough, in order to obtain her current status, she had experienced countless storms. Even today, when she obtained the qualifications to enter the Myriad Soul Dao, there were still countless people waiting for an accident to occur so that they could replace her. I am Jiali. I am here to pay my respects to the patriarchs. Standing in the grand hall, she bowed respectfully to everyone. Fourth miss, you should be clear as to why I summoned you here today. How did you meet this Qin Yu? An elder slowly said from high position. Eastern Zhou Chali said, Qin Yu and I met not too long ago, in the process of competing for a spot to enter the Myriad Soul Dao. She didn't hesitate at all. She recounted everything that had happened that involved Qin Yu, not concealing anything at all. She had a clearer understanding of her family's strength than anyone else. She naturally understood that trying to hide anything now was foolish to the extreme. The hall was quiet. The people that controlled the Colossus, those the Eastern Zhou clan, were all quietly listening, their own thoughts running through their minds. That is what happened. When I saw Qin Yu again today, I was also shocked. I never imagined that the Qin Yu in the God-Sealing Gorge would be him. The moment her voice fell, a cold and gloomy voice sounded out. Fourth miss, are you saying that not too long ago, in the competition for spots, the Qin Yu you met was still extremely ordinary? Eastern Zhou Chali nodded. Yes. Do you think it is possible that he deliberately disguised himself and hid his strength? Eastern Zhou Chali hesitated for a moment. I don't think so. At that time, old Yu was with me. His eyesight shouldn't be wrong. The cold and gloomy voice continued. In other words, in a short period of time, Qin Yu seems to have changed into a completely different person. His strength has risen to a level that even you're shocked by. Eastern Zhou Chali nodded, her heart sinking. Everyone, I think this matter is inappropriate. The master of the cold and gloomy voice was an extremely powerful elder of the Eastern Zhou clan, Eastern Zhou Unhuo. His words naturally carried great weight. There are 2 possibilities for Qin Yu's sudden rise in strength. The first is that he has obtained an inconceivable good fortune during this period of time, thus benefiting from it. But the possibility of this is infinitesimally small. At the very least, I do not believe that there is a lucky chance in this world that can help a cultivator be reborn in such a short period of time. Unless the Qin Yu of today is no longer the person that Eastern Zhou Chali knew. The hall fell silent. Many elders frowned, a dignified look in their eyes. Because this wasn't impossible. Something like seizing someone's body was said to be mysterious and mystical, but with their status and experience, it wasn't anything at all. If Qin Yu's body had really been seized by someone, then his motives for coming to the Eastern Zhou clan were inevitably impure. Eastern Zhou Chali took a deep breath. I admit that the possibility that Elder speaks of does exist, but I believe that the Qin Yu of today is the Qin Yu of the past. Humph! How much do you know about seizing someone's body? How many have you seen? Even if you disguise yourself exactly the same, even if your soul aura is the same, that is normal. Eastern Zhou Unhuo sneered. The myriad soul Dao is not a matter that concerns you alone. The clan has spent an astonishing amount of resources in order to obtain this spot, so how can we allow any accidents to occur? He cupped his hands together. Patriarch, in my opinion, we must thoroughly confirm Qin Yu's identity. Otherwise, we cannot allow him to follow us in. Elder Unhuo's words are reasonable. There is nothing wrong with being more cautious. The origins of this master and servant pair are indeed mysterious, and there are suspicious points everywhere. We must thoroughly investigate this matter. Of course. Eastern Zhou Chali's heart sank. She looked up at the elders that were on good terms with her father, hoping to obtain their support. Cough. An elder coughed and said, although Elder Unho's words are reasonable, do not forget that Qin Yu is not an ordinary cultivator that is trying to obtain a spot to follow. His eyes swept around. To put it bluntly, to other cultivators, those that crazily chase after others and pay any price to obtain a spot to follow are nothing at all in front of Qin Yu. As long as he is willing, he can casually leak out some information, and he can immediately harvest countless olive branches thrown at him. In addition to generous rewards, this isn't an impossibility. If because of our suspicions, Qin Yu becomes a follower of other seed cultivators of the myriad soul Dao, and then we vent our anger on the fourth miss, just how many harvests do you think our Eastern Zhou clan will have left? Everyone, do not forget that not only did he solve the 99th question of the rules several times, but he even caused the God-confining gorge to vanish from sight. If such an opponent enters the myriad soul Dao, just how terrifying will his destructive power and deterrence be? The hall fell silent. Those that expressed their support for Eastern Zhou Unhuo frowned and shut their mouths. The matter of the myriad soul Dao was truly too important. They could wave the flag and cheer, but they couldn't charge to the front. If they really stirred up trouble, the consequences would be unbearable even for them. Eastern Zhou Unhuo coldly sneered. Elder Unhuo's meaning is that our Eastern Zhou clan can only ignore this matter? Eastern Zhou Unhuo lightly said, I have no such intentions. But we must treat Qin Yu with caution. We cannot become enemies with him. Both sides stuck to their own arguments, and each had their own reasons. Finally, the patriarch made a judgment. Qin Yu's identity had to be confirmed, but it had to be done in a gentle manner so that he wouldn't feel any disgust. Both sides reluctantly accepted this result. So, how to confirm Qin Yu's identity became the difficult problem at hand. That night, Eastern Zhou Chali knocked on the door to Qin Yu's courtyard. Under Xiang Shui's respectful but somewhat strange gaze, she entered the room to speak with him. Looking at the closed door, Xiang Shui curled her lips. She felt a bit of a headache. This brat Qin Yu's ability to attract bees and butterflies was far too strong. Eastern Zhou Chali had once been an incomparably powerful goddess that had descended to the world, but now she had come knocking on her door in the middle of the night. This would inevitably increase the difficulty and risk of her plan of borrowing seeds. Ignoring Xiang Shui's wild thoughts, Eastern Zhou Chali entered and sat down. After a moment of hesitation, she directly said, Qin Yu, what I'm about to say might make you feel ashamed and angry, but I have no other choice. I hope you can understand. Qin Yu glanced at her. Because of my background? Eastern Zhou Chali's eyes brightened. With his intelligence, he had directly grasped the crux of the matter. Yes, the elders of my clan are unable to completely rest assured about your status. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. When he had Xiang Shui speak up to help him, she had boasted that he had a high and mighty background. This was all in order to deal with the test of the Eastern Zhou clan itself. However, He had never imagined that things would develop to such a state. Now, almost everyone believed that he had a great background, but Easter Joe Charlie actually knew his true origins. It hadn't been too long since they parted ways. His status had changed far too much, so it would be strange if the Eastern Joe clan didn't suspect him. But no matter how difficult it was to boast, he had to continue raising it. Otherwise, if it died, he would have to find another way to enter the myriad soul Tao. But without a doubt, Eastern Joe Charlie was his best choice. Moreover, he didn't have enough time to obtain another spot to follow. And even if he did, wouldn't they investigate why he left the Eastern Joe clan? There would clearly be problems. In truth, he certainly couldn't say it. Otherwise, Eastern Joe Charlie might not dare to join forces with him and deceive the entire clan. Chinyu apologized inwardly. He bitterly smiled. I'm sorry. Because of certain reasons, without teacher's permission, I cannot announce my status to the outside world. Eastern Joe Charlie frowned. You really can't say it? I can't, Chinyu decisively replied. He certainly knew that he couldn't hesitate at this time. Miss Eastern Joe, I can honestly tell you that I do have some personal reasons for wanting to enter the inheritance of the myriad soul Tao. But towards you, I don't have the slightest bit of malice. Eastern Joe Charlie lightly sighed. I believe you, but the clan isn't willing to take any risks. She hesitated. She stood up and said, the Eastern Joe clan will definitely use other methods to investigate your origins. If I have offended you in any way, I hope you can forgive me. But please rest assured that I will do my best to have the clan agree to let you become my follower. Chinyu sent her away. After Xiang Shui closed the courtyard doors, she blinked her eyes. What is it? Your complexion seems a bit heavy. Chinyu rubbed his temples. It's nothing. Xiang Shui had acted according to his wishes. Now that there was a problem, he couldn't blame her. If he said it, it would only make her feel pressure. Why bother? Chinyu looked down at his palm, a thoughtful look in his eyes. He wondered if the status of an original God disciple could be considered heaven-span. Chapter 998. Cough, cough. This could only be considered a helpless self-deprecation. To the Eastern Joe clan that controlled 100 worlds, although origin divinities were precious, they couldn't be considered a heavyweight. It was impossible to gather as many as dogs, but pulling out 100 people was a simple matter. It seemed that the possibility of relying on Shui Zheng to pass was nearly negligible. Chinyu was a bit annoyed. He really didn't like this feeling of helplessness and helplessness. But now, there didn't seem to be a better method. Even if he went to find a teacher that could pierce through the heavens, he wouldn't be able to make it in time. As Chinyu was feeling annoyed, the colossus that was the Eastern Joe clan had already begun to operate. With its size, it could easily erupt with an unimaginable amount of energy. To determine Chinyu's background, if he didn't want to say anything and they couldn't find any other information, was there any other method? To the average person, this was clearly an impasse. But the Eastern Joe clan was different, so they had a method. The great divination art was an extremely mysterious supernatural ability. According to the karma of the heavens and earth, it could deduce the past and future. Calling it a supernatural ability wasn't too appropriate. This was because its operating principles were nonsense in the eyes of supreme beings. There was no reason to speak of it. Accurately predicting the past and future wasn't reliable at all. But if it was used to determine someone's background, then its credibility was extremely high. After all, as long as one had a great background or an astonishing origin, their aura would inevitably be entangled, and they would have a noble and condescending aura. One couldn't casually touch them. Otherwise, they would suffer a backlash. To put it simply, even if the person you wanted to probe wasn't too terrifying, their aura would fuse together and they would share weal and woe with them. Behind them were people like family, teachers, friends, and so on. As long as the relationship between the two parties was close enough, once you touched their aura, you would be sensed and suffer their anger. So, this in itself was a risky matter. The Eastern Joe clan had found an extremely strong grandmaster. This grandmaster wasn't even the least bit mocking. He had been famous for a long time and had stood there until now. For his fame to spread far and wide, he naturally had a glorious record that was praised by others. This sort of Grandmaster had a transcendent status. Even with the Eastern Zhou clan's strength, they wouldn't easily force him. This time, if it weren't for the Eastern Zhou family clan having something to ask of them, there was no way they would have agreed to use the great divination art on Qinyu. After all, he had solved the 99th question consecutively and even caused the god-confining gorge to suddenly disappear. These were all things that could be seen by everyone. Not to mention, according to the rumors, he had an incomparably terrifying background, and his teacher was a supreme existence. Daring to use the word heavenly to describe him, how could he be an ordinary character? If he was unlucky, he might lose his life because of this. Master Zhou Bai's face was livid, his eyes spitting fire, taking advantage of a burning house. Your Eastern Zhou clan's actions are akin to looting a burning house. Looking at his embarrassed and angry expression, it seemed that he would slam the door and leave at any time, but after a few moments of hesitation, he decided to stay. This old man can give this matter a try. However, I will only carry out the most superficial level of divination. If anything goes wrong, I will immediately stop. If you agree, you will need to pay me a sufficiently satisfactory reward. Do not think that I am trying to rip you off. This is what I deserve for risking my life. Across from him, an Eastern Zhou family clan elder smiled. Of course, everything will be as you say. Moreover, Grandmaster Zhou, please rest assured that our Eastern Zhou family's reward will definitely satisfy you. He gestured with his hand. I believe that Grandmaster also knows the reason why we are doing this. So, if Grandmaster Zhou has no other opinions, then let us begin as soon as possible. Moreover, regarding this matter, no matter what the final result is, please keep it a secret. Zhou Bai flicked his sleeves and coldly coughed. Don't worry, I still have this bit of professional integrity, otherwise I wouldn't have lived to this day. Although the Eastern Zhou family clan had agreed to all of his requests and would definitely give him a satisfactory reward, there was still no smile on Grandmaster Zhou's face. Rather, it became increasingly ugly. He really did feel restless about this matter. He had done similar things several times before, and most of the targets had some background. One of them was even a cultivator with an inheritance from some hidden land. He had suffered some injuries, but Grandmaster Zhou had barely managed to escape unscathed, but this time he felt that something was wrong. As a cultivator who had grasped the mysterious great prophecy art, he had great faith in his own divine senses. This Qinyu was absolutely not ordinary. If he made a single mistake, he feared he would die here today. Following behind the Eastern Zhou family elder, Grandmaster Zhou felt restless. As time passed, he grew stronger and stronger. There were several times when he wanted to turn around and leave, but there was indeed something he needed the Eastern Zhou family clan's help with, so he could only endure it. Moments later, in a hidden hall, all of the upper echelons of the Eastern Zhou family clan gathered. In the center was an altar that had already been constructed. This altar was pure black and seemed to be made from some sort of black jade without any impurities. Looking at it, one could only feel a bottomless darkness, as if one's gaze would be sucked in. As Zhou Bai saw this altar, his tense heart relaxed a little. As expected of the Eastern Zhou family clan, they were truly worthy of being a giant-level existence. With this prophecy altar constructed from the starry sea black jade, he would be much more relaxed. Even if some accident occurred, with the altar as a shield, it would be much easier for him to leave. Taking a deep breath, Grandmaster Zhou stood still. He cupped his hands together and said, Zhou Bai greets the Eastern Zhou family head. With his status, even when facing the Eastern Zhou family elders, he could treat them as equals. In fact, his status was even higher. The only ones he needed to greet on his own initiative were those who held the highest authority in the Eastern Zhou family. After all, it was rumored that this Eastern Zhou family head had lived for many years and hadn't fought for a very, very long time. His strength had already reached an inconceivable boundary. If he could transform himself and take another step forward, the strength of the Eastern Zhou family head would experience a qualitative leap. Standing in front of him now and feeling the undetectable aura of the primal chaos, Grandmaster Zhou became increasingly sure of this. Naturally, he was respectful. The Eastern Zhou family head nodded. I'll have to trouble Mr. Zhou. The space around him was constantly in a state of slight distortion, wrapping around his entire body. It was impossible to see his true appearance. Even his eyes seemed strange and twisted. They seemed close, but also seemed to come from the endless distance. From these words, Zhou Bai could feel an unquestionable firmness. His heart sank, and then a bitter taste rose in his mouth. He took a deep breath and bowed. I will do my best. Even when facing the elders of the Eastern Zhou clan, he still dared to negotiate terms and put on airs. But against this person, forget it. Making a move might not necessarily result in death, but going against his will would surely result in one's soul dissipating. Of this, Grandmaster Zhou had no doubts whatsoever. His figure flickered, and Zhou Bai landed on the altar. After a moment of hesitation, he lifted his palm. Light surged, and a tortoise shell appeared. This tortoise shell was the size of an adult's palm. Its surface was covered with deep veins and patterns, each one filled with the aura of endless years. It was clear that it had existed for countless years. With a thought, the tortoise shell flew up on its own and landed on top of Zhou Bai's head. The patterns on its surface lit up, and beams of light fell down, weaving together to form a giant tortoise shell projection that covered him within. This appearance from afar was like a person wearing a giant tortoise shell, or perhaps a giant tortoise had cultivated into a human form. But right now, in this hidden hall, no one would find this strange or funny, because they had long heard of the Luo River god tortoise shell. It was a treasure that Zhou Bai rarely used since he became famous. Now, he had not even used the great divination art and had already summoned the tortoise shell. It was clear that he was serious. After a short pause in the silent hall, Zhou Bai's calm and deep voice sounded out. No one could understand what he meant. At the same time, his body began to move. It was similar to the strange dance steps recorded in ancient records of tribes in ancient times dancing around a bonfire in the middle of the night. But right now, the strange voice and the strange dance steps, when combined together, gave off an oppressive feeling. It was as if the space in this hall, under the influence of some unknown power, had become viscous, as if it was about to solidify. Every time he took a breath, he had to expend a great deal of energy. Moreover, he could clearly feel that when the viscous air passed through his trachea and entered his lungs, it produced a difficult friction feeling. There was even a slight burning and slightly prickling sensation. The interior of the altar made from star sea ink jade was pure black, like an endless abyss. But right now, in this abyss, dots of light slowly lit up. The light they emitted wasn't very intense, but there were a lot of them. One after another, they floated up into the air as if they were trying to copy the boundless starry sky above their heads into the altar, not a single one of which was missing. Therefore, the entire altar gradually began to release a vast and majestic aura, the aura of time almost condensed into a tangible form. As Zhou Bai spat out the last syllable, his feet coincided perfectly with the last step of the dance. Above his head, the Luo River tortoise shell trembled. The countless beams of light that fell down began to move in a rhythmic rhythm. They were like ripples in the water, like weeds that tumbled about without a trace. Yet they gave off an incomparably profound and mysterious feeling. It was like these fluctuating beams of light contained some great secret between the heavens and earth. It gave off a feeling that once they were unraveled, they could see the true world. Zhou Bai looked up. Starry rivers sparkled in his eyes, as if the process of the altar copying the starry sky was also projected into his eyes. Thus, at this time, his eyes were no longer ordinary. They were the incarnation of the starry sea in the vault of heaven, covering the entire world. Naturally, He could find all traces of the past and future of this world. At this time, he would search for the source of Qin Yu's aura, tracing it back to determine just what sort of divine being he was. It had begun. In a corner of the hall, Eastern Zhou Jolly clenched her fists. Because this matter involved her, she was allowed to watch from the sidelines. But she had no ability to interfere with the entire process. She could only silently wait for the final result to appear. Qin, you mustn't disappoint me. Within the starry sea black jade altar, the countless motes of light began to slowly revolve. As they revolved, the starry sky projection that appeared in Zhou Bai's eyes also began to revolve. The great divination art revolved. He had already locked onto the thread of karma that represented Qin Yu and was tracing it back to its source. At almost the same time, within the Eastern Zhou family's encampment, in a courtyard, Qin Yu's eyes flashed open, his eyebrows tightly furrowed together. Within his soul space, the blue sun and purple moon revolved. The sun and moon force field they produced began to violently shake, as if an invisible strength was trying to break through its blockade. Qin Yu instantly understood. In order to determine his identity, the Eastern Zhou family had begun to make a move. With the sun and moon force field wrapped around him, he had jumped out of the world, no longer within the five elements and yin and yang of the world. Unless the other party was powerful enough to surpass the level of this world, it was impossible for them to continue spying on him. His thoughts raced. Suddenly, a thought appeared in Qin Yu's mind. He wondered if the jade embryo egg that had fused into his body could be sensed. By relying on this, he might be able to gain the trust of the Eastern Zhou family. Otherwise, if he kept them outside the door, that would only arouse more suspicion. The jade embryo egg was one of the great secrets of Qin Yu's body that no one else could know about. If it was truly discovered, it would inevitably cause a storm of blood, so this matter itself was extremely risky. If he wasn't careful, there would be a great mess. But Qin Yu had underestimated the cultivators of the world. Or it could be said that he didn't know that there was a reason why the great divination art was so unbelievable in the eyes of supreme beings. The sun and moon force field had indeed blocked the unknown spying from the outside, but it hadn't disappeared because of this. Rather, it had fused together with the sun and moon force field. Of course, this was only a saying. To be more precise, the fluctuations of strength had synchronized with the sun and moon force field. Thus, it was still blocked outside. But in Qin Yu's senses, his defenses had already failed. This was because the feeling of being spied on had become even more intense. It was like traces of a cold and gloomy aura were constantly passing through his flesh and spreading deep into his body. They were truly worthy of being a giant-level Eastern Zhou family. They had actually managed to find such a mysterious and mystical method. At this time, the jade embryo egg that had fused into his body seemed to sense something. With a humming sound, it began to gently tremble. Qin Yu's complexion changed. He wanted to stop it, but it was too late. He subconsciously tensed his body. He didn't know whether this change was good or bad. But considering these things now was clearly meaningless. He could only suppress his thoughts and wait for the changes to occur. As Qin Yu was feeling nervous, he didn't know just what sort of astonishing change had occurred because of the jade embryo eggs trembling. In a hidden hall, Zhou Bai stood atop the altar, the river tortoiseshell atop his head. His aura was faintly discernible, and his eyes were filled with a sea of stars. Suddenly, his eyes widened. The sea of stars in his eyes began to rapidly spin, and his body shivered, as if he were withstanding the weight of tens of thousands of soldiers. Kacha! Kacha! The surface of the starry black jade altar suddenly shattered like ice. Cracks began to appear, weaving together like a dense spider web. There were loud gasps in the hall. Although everyone had guessed this, if the rumors were true, then Qin Yu did indeed have a great background. But now, this background seemed to be even more terrifying than they had imagined. Although the great divination art was mysterious and unfathomable, with everyone's status, They had heard of it before and had a general understanding of it. Now, the great divination art had just been used. In other words, it had only probed the most superficial information about Qin, but had already triggered a backlash that the starry black jade altar couldn't withstand. They were well aware of what this meant. Qin background was likely far more terrifying than the rumors made it out to be. In fact, at this step, there was no longer anything worth doubting about Qin background. With such a background, there was no need for him to personally take such a risk to deal with Eastern Zhou Jia Li or the Eastern Zhou family clan. Zhou Bai took a deep breath. He was about to stop the great divination art, but at this time, the silent Eastern Zhou patriarch suddenly said, "Continue." His voice was calm, but there was a cold determination in his words, like a towering divine mountain that couldn't be shaken. Zhou Bai's eyes revealed a hint of hesitation. But time wouldn't stop. As he hesitated, the great divination art continued. Thus, it began to resist the suppression and probe the deeper source of Qin Yu's aura. Infinitely far away, within a grand hall, the person sitting on the throne suddenly opened his eyes. Thunder flashed within them, carrying with it a world-destroying might. Insolence! A deep roar exploded out like a thunderclap. Waves of sound billowed out, and an invisible aura fused into the world. Within the invisible aura, it was as if the sea was enraged, and in an instant, huge waves were set off. Billions of seawater poured into the river, and with a roar, it flowed against the current. Bang! The starry black jade altar seemed to suffer a heavy blow. The number of cracks on its surface suddenly increased by over 100 times. Zhou Bai spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes widened. The starry sky projection fell into chaos, shaking as if it would shatter at any moment. This aura, the Eastern Zhou patriarch's eyes brightened. He took a step forwards and appeared in the skies above the starry black jade altar. He lifted a hand and pressed down. Bang! A boundless strength surged out from nothingness, suppressing the entire world and imprisoning all within. The strongest under a ruler. There was no way he would be wrong about this aura. This was because he himself was infinitely close to this boundary. If he had a lucky chance and took another step forwards, he would be able to succeed. At that time, the Eastern Zhou patriarch would be able to take another step forwards and become a super existence comparable to a holy land. Zhou Bai paled. "Thank you, patriarch, for saving me." He was sure that if it weren't for the patriarch's intervention, even if he didn't die, he would have shed off dozens of layers of skin. The Eastern Zhou patriarch had no expression. "There is no need to thank me, because I want you to continue." Zhou Bai's body shook and his eyes widened. The gratitude that had just appeared in his heart instantly vanished. If it weren't for the fact that he knew that if he cursed out loud, he would die a miserable death, he was sure he would have jumped thousands of feet and cursed the heavens and earth. With things having reached this step, it was clear that this Qin Yu's background was so great that it left one in despair. "I only sensed a little bit, and I didn't have any ill intentions towards him, but I still ended up in this situation. If I continued, what was the difference between that and seeking death?" The Eastern Zhou patriarch lightly said, "I know what you are thinking in your heart, but there is still a difference. For instance, if you continue, with my protection, you might not die. But if you refuse, I can guarantee that you will die right now. If you don't believe me, you can try." Zhou Bai gulped. With the status of the Eastern Zhou patriarch, there was no doubt in his words. He clenched his teeth and suddenly shouted out loud. The river tortoise shell above his head emitted loud cracking sounds before it shattered into countless pieces. In the next moment, an incomparably vast aura poured into Zhou Bai's body from above, causing his eyes to violently shake. It seemed as if the shattered starry sea diagram would completely stabilize at any moment. Rumble, rumble. Pushed by this strength, his eyes continued forwards, probing into Qin Yu's deeper secrets. Suddenly, the entire hall fell silent. All sound vanished. Everyone remained in the same position as a moment ago, as if they had been frozen in the air. Within the shattered starry sea black jade altar, A blurry figure appeared in the starry sea diagram. Perhaps it was because the altar was broken, but her figure was blurry and indistinct. In the next moment, this figure opened her eyes. No one could describe the beauty of these eyes, because they seemed to represent the vast and boundless world. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.